And welcome to the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special. We are live here on the South Side. Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic as the Panthers reload for another year. It's a huge day for Pitt for the football program.
Yeah, it is. Signing day is always a big day. You go through the whole recruiting process, get through the whole year, and you're getting to know these kids, getting to know what kind of players they are. Are they going to fit in here? Are they going to come to the University of Pittsburgh and have an impact and become not only good players but graduate good in the classroom? This is a good day to get to know those guys and get them involved because come summertime, for four of them, they're already here, but come summertime for these guys, it's going to be locked and loaded, ready to roll.
And to settle the question, who was first to sign and fax in that national letter of intent, it was Aaron Reese out of the Chambersburg area. You're familiar with that battle to be the first one in. Zach Chellingsworth also in, along with Luke McLean, has his letter of intent already in with the Panthers.
Yeah, and Reese is a big kid, and offensive line fits the mold. An area of need for this team is to get some offensive line and really rebuild the front offensive and defensive line. Chellingsworth, a good wide receiver, a guy who's a solid player, and really can become kind of that Mike Shanahan type, a guy who's solid, who you're going to count on. He played in a very, very complex offense at South Fayette High School. And then McLean, a big defensive end, another area of need for this football team, getting pass rushers, getting guys that can get after the passer, a big area. All three areas of need for this team. Good to get those guys in early.
And there's also four other players who have already enrolled in classes. Scott Orndoff is going to join us here in a few minutes. But Tyreek Jarrett, along with Trayvon Chapman and Shakir Soto, each accomplished, and now they get that opportunity. What kind of advantage do they have having the spring ball?
It's a huge advantage. It's really a dry run. You get to really focus on this offense, get to focus on this defense. But depending what kind of side you are on the football, Orndorff and Chapman obviously offensively are going to focus on getting to know the Paul Chris offense, getting to know the system. Orndorff, I think, can contribute at the tight end position. You look at the impact J.P. Holtz had last year. I think it's a spot where he can be involved early. Good for him to get a jump start. Trayvon Chapman, the quarterback position with Tino Sinceri graduating. Another guy who's going to have an opportunity to compete. Jarrett, defensive tackle. You look at that position right now with Aaron Donald coming back. Another position where you look to fortify it, add depth. And these guys really, Shakir Soto, I think, can have another impact at defensive end. Really are getting a head start on the rest of the guys.
Soto had an amazing career, 52 sacks in his high school career. You're glad you didn't face him.
Yeah.
I know. But, that's an amazing number. I don't care what level you're playing.
Yeah, there's a clip on film of him playing in like a monsoon, and he just drills this quarterback, and, you wince because you don't want to be a part of that. So another guy, I think, who's going to have an impact and has something to say about that defensive end position.
Take us back personally a few years ago when it was your day and your time, what it was like sitting there and putting your name and faxing that in.
It's validation to some degree that the whole process is over and that you can kind of just move forward. Like these guys who were in here early, I wanted to get a jump start on things. I didn't get here that early, but I wanted to get a jump start on things and just start the process. You're focused on performing and playing football. It's not on all the attention and the media stuff it's involved with signing that letter of intent. But to some degree, it's definitely a stepping stone in your life because you're really cementing your future. And to sign to the University of Pittsburgh for me was a huge accomplishment. And but at the same time, I was fortunate to get it in early, get on with my day, and get focused now on getting to campus and starting with the work.
How do you get focused, though? Because once that goes through the fax machine, you got to want to get into the film room and get ready to go for the year. Then you've got to wait those months to get ready for spring ball.
Right. It's always a balance of trying to make sure you're not too into it and you're not jumping ahead of yourself because you want to be able to relish the moment. But certainly there was a wait involved. For some of these guys who were here earlier, there isn't. But you want to capture the moment, enjoy it, and then really start to focus on the future and get yourself ready. The weight room's the biggest thing.
One of the promising young tight ends from right here at Seton LaSalle, Scott Orndoff, is going to join us next. We're also going to update you on the list of those who have signed with the Panthers. It is the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special right here on PittsburghPanthers.com. And welcome back to the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day Special. Jeff Hathorn, Pat Bostic, and Scott Orndoff, who's here from Seton LaSalle High School, Waynesburg areas where you grew up.
Yep.
Well, you've already enrolled in school, but yet this is kind of a ceremonial first day for you. Can you kind of give us your thoughts as you get ready for your Pitt football career?
Well, I mean, I've been very blessed to have the opportunity to come here early the way I did, and I mean, like everyone else, it's exciting that all the other guys are coming in the summer, are going to be signing their letters today. So it's kind of like the next step in like the journey for the next 4 years. But I mean, it's been surreal being able to come here like a semester early to get a jump start on everything that I've been doing.
Now, I know you probably had the mindset early that you wanted to come here early. You wanted to get a jump start on the guys. But sitting back this season, and obviously going through your high school season, as that time got closer, did watching J.P. Holtz have the impact he had as a freshman motivate you more to get here early?
Yeah, definitely, because I mean, when you see how he had to come in as a freshman and he had to make a big impact on the team, that definitely gave me more incentive to want to come here early and work just as hard, because that could be me next year.
Scott, can you give us an idea? Let's take us back to when you were deciding on your schools. And I know a lot of big schools were involved. I'm sure you got tons of letters. Why was Pitt the right fit for you?
Well, I mean, way back from the beginning when I was going to go to Wisconsin, I liked Coach Chris, I liked Coach Rudolph and the offense that they were running. And I mean, when they left Wisconsin, I was still like very close. I had a good relationship with them, but I wanted to look around a little bit just to make sure it was the right place for me. And after I visited like Michigan and Virginia, but then after I made all my visits, I still knew that the Coach Chris, he was the coach I wanted to play for.
Can you give us an idea how tough that is? I mean, you're dealing with coaches, and I'm sure they're selling their programs and telling you all the great things. How tough it is to make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. People like they talk about how recruits like get all this attention, but really, it's tough on them sometimes, because you get like you're getting torn between all these different places, and eventually you got to make a decision that's going to be best for yourself. That's going to change pretty much the rest of your life. So it's definitely it's not easy for recruits.
Now, you come here kind of with a fresh start. Being a college freshman, I remember what that's like. It's almost like you're starting anew. But you had a very successful high school year, and we got some clips of your high school career, and kind of looking at you play in that kind of a slot receiver position, playing some wideout, playing some tight end. What do you think is going to be the biggest adjustment for you now coming to Pitt, playing a true inline position?
Well, I think just like working on my blocking more. I got a little bit of work on blocking this year, but I think definitely like learning the right techniques and how to be able to block like big 300-pound defensive linemen will definitely be my biggest stepping stone for this year.
For you personally, the competition with JP, as Pat mentioned, Drew Carswell, other tight ends that are in this class, do you kind of relish that opportunity to compete in camp to win that job?
Yeah, definitely, because I mean, when you're in college, regardless of what year you are, you're gonna have to compete every year in and year out, because like every year they're gonna bring in new guys in your position that they think they're gonna be able to play. So, I mean, it's always a competition, and you always have to rise up to it and work as hard as you can just to get a spot on the field.
Now, fast forward to the present, talking about obviously the future and the past here, but right now, what's it been like for you to get on campus, get enrolled in classes, have your own dorm room, do your own laundry, all that stuff? What's that been like for you? What's the adjustment been like? Smooth, bumpy? How's it been?
Well, I mean, it's been pretty smooth, because I've had a lot of practice fending for myself the last couple of years being away from home when I went to high school. So it wasn't a huge adjustment, just not being around my family as much. That's the only thing that's really different for me. But I mean, I'm close enough to home where I can see them. Like, I can go home any weekend I want, really. So it hasn't been as hard as it could be for other people.
Scott Orndoff joining us from Seton LaSalle High School. Waynesburg area is where you grew up. Did you grow up a Panther fan? Who were you when you were?
Well, when I was younger, where I lived, it was always people would say, "Oh, are you a Pitt or WVU fan?" Because we're like right in the middle. And I was always a Penn State fan when I was younger.
Whoa.
So I know I was always stuck with them, and then eventually that just kind of tapered off, and I wasn't really a fan of anybody, to tell you the truth.
How much do you guys in the class stay in contact, especially with social media? It's so easy to reach out to talk to some of the other guys. Are there guys you've been able to reach out, and do you openly talk with some of the other guys?
Yeah, I mean, was that like Zach Challingsworth? I'm good friends with. I played against him in high school. I'm always in contact with him. Luke McLean, I talked to a lot when I was like during the recruiting process. But now I've been so busy with just my life, I haven't really been able to reach out to very many of them.
What's the academic change like for you?
I mean, it's hard that you have to be more independent. Like, teachers aren't going to hold your hand through all your assignments. But other than that, it's not a whole lot different than high school was for me. So it's not that hard of an adjustment.
Now, spring ball isn't too far away. We were talking before the show about how it's really a month and change away. How excited are you? You've been in the weight room. All that stuff's great, but you want to play football. How excited are you to put those pads on and get cracking with spring football in March?
I mean, it's definitely something that's exciting. I mean, I'm nervous about it a little bit, but it's just something different. But the fact that I'm coming into the spring makes it that much easier, because I know by the time all the other recruits get on campus, I'll have already gone through that, and I'll be like adjusted to the speed of the game, and I'll already have the playbook kind of under my belt a little bit. So, I mean, that makes it more exciting than nervous for me.
Can you give us an idea? We see Coach Chris behind a podium or on a sideline of what he's like and what it was about him that you really liked, and when you decided on Pitt.
Well, one thing I liked about Coach Chris was he's very down to earth. Like, he's just like any other person you would see in the street. He's not like, if you would meet him, you would never think that he was a football coach in college, because he's so real, and that like you feel comfortable around him. You don't feel like you just have to set yourself to a higher standard when you're around or when you're talking to him. He's just someone you would see on the street.
He's very much like that. He's very much a common guy.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And he's got a sense of humor. I don't think people realize that he's got a great sense of humor.
But he's a darn good football coach, and some of the tight ends they've produced out of Wisconsin. Obviously, you talked about your original commitment, and then now coming to Pitt with Coach Chris being here. How much did that factor in? It's just what they've done with tight ends.
Yeah, that was definitely big for me, because like Coach Rudolph and Coach Chris will always show me films of all the tight ends they've had that are in the NFL, and like some of them had 80 catches in one season, and almost all of them are still in the pros now. So that was definitely a big factor in my decision to play for them.
Scott Orndoff, congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Pitt family. We look forward to seeing you in spring practice and in the spring game. When we continue, we'll update our list of National Letters of Intent. It's Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent special right here on PittsburghPanthers.com. And welcome back to the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special. Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic, as we're going to take you through all the guys who have signed to play at the University of Pittsburgh. We'll go through 11:30. Don Rebel from MSA, who knows high school players better than probably anybody in this area. He's also going to come along around 9:30. There are 4 in now. Chris Blewett is the latest guy in, place kicker, who came in during camp out of Virginia and just wowed them with what he was able to do.
Yeah, 55-yard field goal, I think, with time expired.
And like a hurry-up thing.
Yeah, and Coach Junko puts him through the ringer now with those kickers and stuff, and it's quite the test to get those guys trained and see who's going to make the cut, and obviously he impressed.
Aaron Reese, the offensive lineman, is the first to come in. You've looked at film in a lot of these guys. Tell us what stands out about Aaron Reese, the 6'5", 300-pounder.
I really like the starting point for this class is going to be offensive line. He's a kid with a big frame. He fits the mold. And you know, none of these guys, it sounds pretty obvious, none of these guys are fat. You could put muscle on these guys. They're going to be athletic guys. They can pull, they can trap, they can pass block. There's just a foundation to build the type of offensive lineman we've seen to come out of Wisconsin when Coach Chris was there, and the type of offensive lineman you can get from this area, Pennsylvania, Ohio, into West Virginia, and into Jersey and New York, to be the next wave of offensive linemen that are talented. Big frame, big athletic kid.
You mentioned big frame, and these guys come in. They have weight rooms in high school. What's that adjustment? What was that adjustment like for you, and what's it going to be like when they come in and get into the Pitt weight room and start really adding some bulk to their frames?
It goes from 3 days a week to 7 days a week, really. I mean, you're not lifting every day, but just taking care of your body. I mean, you get to know your body more because you're training more, and you got to get after it because you got to keep up. These guys are bigger, faster, and stronger than they've ever been. But to get a guy like Aaron Reese, a guy who has the frame, but you don't have to deconstruct before you construct. And that's going to be the fun thing for Coach Todd Rice in the weight room to get him up to speed. And with offensive linemen, it's naturally going to take a little longer. Some guys are more ready than others. I think Aaron Reese is at a perfect stage coming out of high school to become and develop.
One of 5 receivers in this recruiting class, Zach Challingsworth from South Fayette, second one to sign in if we're keeping track of the order they come in. He's a 6'2", 185-pounder. Does he remind you of a Shanahan type when he came out of high school?
Shanahan was taller, but I like Zach's just the knowledge of the game. He's got a great awareness. He played in a pretty complex system under Coach Joe Rossi at South Fayette. A lot of formations. He lined up in different spots. You can see a very adept route runner, quick, faster than you probably give him credit for. Good with the ball after the catch bubble screens, out cuts. He's a guy who can play in a lot of different spots. And in this game, where the passing game has become more part of football than it ever has been, it's more popular. Teams score a lot of points. You have to have guys with position flexibility. You can play slot, you can play flanker, split end. Zach can do that, and he's got the speed to take the top off the coverage, and you can throw some deep balls to him. And it's a position now; it's not too deep, so he could very well work his way in to the rotation at that spot.
And one of the best AA programs in the area, averaged over 20 yards a catch, 15 touchdowns. What's the adjustment going to be like for him, as complex as that offense was, to now come into college offense and see that different playbook?
Well, you've got all sorts of different things. Obviously, the natural size of the playbook is going to, the breadth of plays is going to increase. That's natural because you have more time to work on it. You're at it more. You've got spring football. You've got route adjustments. You've got to understand protection at times to break your route off. You've got to understand coverage. You might have a route adjustment. These things factor into play because just the plurality, the amount of things defenses do is greater. So you have to be ready to combat that offensively. Thus, you have more to do offensively.
Also in this offense, you've got to block, and maybe that's a change for star receivers. I don't know how much Zach was asked to block in high school. It's something that's going to be new for him.
Yeah,
too.
good defensive player, though. A guy who physical, doesn't shy away from contact. So I think that bodes well for him blocking at the receiver position.
Luke McLean was the third one in, defensive lineman out of Grand Blanc, Michigan, 6'3", 235. Luke adds more to that depth, and another guy who can add some weight when he gets into college.
Absolutely, and you need those defensive ends. This team has to fortify that position. Did get near enough productivity from that spot last year, and he's a guy out of Michigan, one of the best players in the state of Michigan, who can have an impact. And I like his athleticism, a stand-up guy. He can play in a 2-point or a 3-point, can get after the passer. He attacks the football and has a nose for the ball. In recruiting, so much is talked about, where does this guy fit, what position is he? I want to see good football players. I want to see guys that just have a nose for the ball, like contact, are physical, and they're going to come here, and that's Pittsburgh. You come here, you love football, and this guy seems to love football. And was watching him play. He loves the position, played some linebacker. I like his overall tool set. I think he can be an impact guy. We'll see how quickly that happens.
So it's kind of like the it, or you've got to see it, if you will. I know people talk about that intangible that you see, guys with a nose for the ball. How do you try to find that? Is it through tape? Is it meeting the guy? How do you try to weed that out?
It's tough to really quantify in words, but I think you watch a guy tackle. Some guys just have a natural ability to snap someone's head back, to really drive someone to the ground. You see the aggressiveness. You see the want to. You see just a will to be a force. And he's got that. Not to say that you dominate every play, but you can see when you watch a highlight tape or you watch a game that he's involved, not only when the ball's around him, but he's not around him. He's chasing down the line. He's got the ability to close, come from the backside, effort. you not only highlight tapes can be misleading, and that's what people watch a lot is these highlight tapes. So watching a full game, see a guy when the ball's not around him, see how he plays, see when he's getting double teams, see when he's getting off those double teams. That's when you can really start to find that it factor.
You know, I love and there's so many websites and people that devote their lives to recruiting rankings. And where is this school compared to this school? And you think about the hundreds of millions that are spent at the combine in the NFL, and they don't get it right. You see how many first-round busts in the NFL. It really is hard to quantify, especially what a teenager is going to become into his 20s.
It is, and player development is not any less important than it was before. So rankings really don't come into – really when they get here is when it starts. I mean, rank a recruiting class 3 years after the fact when they're juniors. And people talk about that a lot, and that makes sense. But guys have to develop. These guys are 18, 17, sometimes years old. They have yet to fully mature. They've never hit the weight room like they're going to hit it when they get on campus. They've never been involved in a football environment under a guy like Paul Chryst who loves the game, who is as thorough as you're going to find, where you can really hone in on what can a guy do, what can he become, and then allow him to flourish. And I think this is a learning conducive environment.
And here's another thing I like about Luke McClain is, you know, last year when you looked at the Pitt defense, maybe you worried about the offensive lineman or defensive lineman around Donald. You thought about maybe the linebackers don't have the depth. But there's going to be some opportunities maybe for McClain and some other guys to have a red shirt, to be able to watch some of the things because of the depth on that D-line and in the linebacker position this year.
Absolutely. And I think particularly the tackle position, you'll have some guys that can sit because you've got some depth in there. And guys are going to have to step up at the end position. When you look at guys like Brian Murphy and you look at a guy like Devin Cook, who's going to come in and have a chance to impact. You look at the freshmen that did play last year, Darrell Render, K.K. Mosley-Smith, who was at Milford for a year but came in, had an impact. Those guys are going to step into more prominent roles. So now you've got time, hopefully, to redshirt. You want to do that. The redshirt's there because it's a benefit. You want to use it if you can.
We mentioned Chris Blewett. One of the areas where there is a graduation and there is an immediate job opening is at place kicker. Do you see a freshman coming in? I guess he's going to have that opportunity to win the job.
He will. It's going to be a competition, and there's going to be situations throughout camp where there's going to be situations where Coach Chryst is going to put them, like the team surrounding him, hooting and hollering, and make him kick a field goal under duress, because that's when you find out. I mean, we just saw a rookie out of Texas kicking the Super Bowl for the Baltimore Ravens, and so it can be done to make the transition. This kid's got a big leg. He won the kickoff competition in a camp where guys who were coming to that camp knew that Kevin Harper would be graduating, so they'd be competing for a position on the team to compete for a job. And Chris Blewett came away the most respected, the most impressive. So hopefully he does have an opportunity and does take hold of this thing, because have a kicker for 4 years, that come that junior, senior year, they become a Connor Lee. That's automatic.
Well, you're talking about opening some eyes, to be able to hurry up, kick a 55-yarder at a camp where you know the coaches are there. It really had to be an eye-opener for the coaches as well, and give this kid an opportunity to come in. And, if you have a name like Blewett, I'm sure he's had to deal with certain things, so mentally he's tough.
Yeah, he better be. I mean, you got articles on prominent websites about him, so I'm sure he's used to it. I'm sure he's heard it since he started playing sports.
So 4 that we know of that have signed. We mentioned those 4. And the 4 that are coming in, we had an opportunity to talk with Scott. We mentioned some of the positions defensively, offensively. There may be a position or 2 on the offensive line. I know there are a few returners, but a couple of key guys that aren't coming back. Ryan Turnley, Chris Jacobson, of course, come to mind.
Center position is going to be huge. It's as important to that offensive group as the quarterback is to the offense as a whole. That offensive line starts with the center position to see who's going to compete for that spot. Artie Rowell, a guy who's returning. You look at some of these guys that are going to compete for that position, who's going to get involved in that competition. That'll be big. And then obviously the movement. What type of movement are you going to see in the offensive line? Are they going to move Corey King, Matt Rotherham into guard positions? Juantez Hollins is back. Will be eligible this year to play after serving for disciplinary reasons last year. Will be involved in the tackle spot along with Adam Bisnawadi, a newcomer. And so there's a lot of turnover. There's a lot of bodies at the offensive line. It's finding the best 5.
Chris Jacobson couldn't talk enough about Bisnawadi and what he did during the bowl practices and how far he's come during his redshirt freshman year. Not that he's a lock, but does he look to you like he's going to be a starter this coming year?
Absolutely. I'll never forget this, and I'm not going to mention any names, but this is a little anecdote. I was walking around the facility one day after practice, and the guys come in, they watch film after practice. And this was one of the practices, in December leading up to the bowl game. It was kind of a hodgepodge of getting ready for Ole Miss and then getting ready for next year. and all the guys are watching film, and all of them are watching the same play. And I'm thinking to myself, are they watching the same play? It was Adam Bisnawadi on scout team planting one of the starting linebackers. I'm talking about lifting him off the ground and planting him. And I'm not going to mention any names, but that was quite impressive.
We do have another commitment in. We are watching the Pitt National Letter of Intent Day here on Pitt Live Wire. And James Conner is in, the running back out of McDowell High School. Conner's 6'2", 230. Maybe a fullback type. It's definitely a big type of back, someone that could be in the backfield and help with a rush shell.
Yeah, he has got position flexibility too. And he's a guy who can catch the football. He's physical and really runs hard and finishes runs. He's got better speed than people give him credit for because he's got a big frame. He's 6'2", 235 range. So big kid, a big back. Again, fits that power style. I can see him being a short yardage guy. Reminds me a little bit. I'm not going to go making these drastic comparisons, but Henry Hynoski, a very powerful, big, bruising running back in high school that has the opportunity either to play running back in some spots, some short yardage situations, or every down and be a great pass protector and also block. So I'll be interested to follow him throughout camp to see where he ends up positionally because I really do think he provides position flexibility. I'm probably going to say that 300 times throughout the course of this show, but he's a guy who can play multiple spots. That's a good thing.
When you're a player and you come in and you have in your mind where you're going to play, how tough is it to keep an open mind that, hey, maybe tailback isn't the right position. Maybe I'm a fullback. Maybe I'm a linebacker. Doran Dickerson played a lot of different positions before he found what was best for him. When you're coming in as a high school kid and you've been the star, it takes a special kid to be able to adapt and adjust to what the coaches feel is best for you.
Absolutely, and you watch the film and you see him playing offense, you see him playing defense. He's a guy who loves football. That's the first thing you want to find, and we heard Paul Chris say it all the time. I want guys that love football, and this James Conner kid, I think, is one of those guys. He likes to play, whether it's both sides of the ball. Henry was like that. Henry came in as one of the most highly touted running backs in the history of the state of Pennsylvania and had to really suck up his pride to play fullback. And for credit, he's playing for the New York Giants right now. So James Conner is a guy that loves football. He's bought into the program, wants to be a part of this thing, and wants to win. Team first.
So here are the guys we have so far. We have Chris Blewett. We have Zach Challingsworth, along with Luke McLean, James Conner. And now Dorian Johnson has signed and will be a Pitt Panther. The prized possession, one of the guys that you really look to. Here's a kid out of Bell Vernon that could have played anywhere, and he decided to play at the University of Pittsburgh.
It's huge. It's huge. I mean, he's huge, so it's great. I mean, he's a menacing offensive tackle. He plays with the same aggressiveness you would expect out of a guy. I think he can have an instant impact, but who am I to say? Just watch him come off the ball. Another guy with a big frame. He's got muscle. I mean, he's cut up. He's a specimen. And watching him come off the ball, driving guys 7, 8, 9, 10 yards off the football and not stopping until the whistle blows. You don't find that a lot. I mean, that's the it factor. That's a guy who just loves to dominate. And that's what they need up front. That's a position of need. We'd have to identify that. Now, where he can play, who knows? He's athletic enough to play guard. He's athletic enough to play tackle and pass block. He can pull. He can do everything. To me, he's one of the best offensive linemen, if not the best, I've ever seen come out of high school.
We had an opportunity to talk to him about why it was Pitt, and he said it was just the right fit. He liked the feel here. And the other thing that he said that really floored me for a guy of his status, I'll redshirt. If that's what's best for the team, I'll redshirt. And, Paul Chris does not. Chad Wojtek did it. Bisnawadi did it. I love a guy that comes in with the attitude, if that's what's best for the team, I'll redshirt. I
love it too because we were talking earlier about all the recruiting sites and all the press these guys get. It's changed since I was a recruit. For a guy to have that type of unselfish mentality, worried about the benefit of the team before his own particular interests is impressive. And he's a mature kid. Mature beyond his years. You look at him and you know that, and then you hear him talk, and obviously you've had the benefit of talking to him, and just impressive guy.
6'5", 290, projects as an offensive lineman, of course, played on the other side of the ball as well. Running back, some say maybe the easiest position to come in as a freshman, but people say that the offensive line can be the toughest because of some of the techniques and some of the things that you have to do at college that you never did in high school. What is the adjustment like for offensive linemen And what is that? Can you give us an idea of what that transition is like and where they have to really improve?
Comparable to a quarterback, really. It's the most. I think I love watching offensive line play because I think it's among the most intricate positions as far as techniques and assignments are concerned. In high school, you watch a team on film, they play one front, you design some runs, and just go. When you're playing, these teams in the ACC now, they're going to have multiple fronts, under 3-4. You've got to have adjustments. You've got to communicate. You've got blitzes. You've got pass protection, different types. Just the breadth of the playbook is going to be his biggest adjustment.
We love social media. And if you go to hashtag #PittLiveWire, as you see right at the bottom of the screen, you can ask questions to us. You may have a question about some of the guys that have signed. Again, we have 5 in so far. You are watching the Pitt Livewire National Letter of Intent Day special, as the Panthers have 5 in plus 4. So it's 9 so far as Panthers get ready for some more faxes to come through the machine. It's amazing with technology. The NCAA, it still has to be a fax. So you got to rev that thing up, make sure everything's working, make sure the ink is good, and you have plenty of paper.
Yeah, it's funny because we're talking about social media on this show, and we're faxing in. I mean, these guys know what a fax machine is. Some of these recruits. I mean, I know how it works.
It's a history lesson for
them. It is. It's valuable. I think it's a lesson well taught.
Yeah, this is how we used to have to get information, and of course, it's so horrible for us because 30 years ago, you had to actually use mail, real mail with a stamp and everything. It was really an amazing process when I was growing up, at least.
I feel so bad for you.
Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic. We're going to continue here on Pitt Livewire with a National Letter of Intent Day special. We'll update any new signings that the Panthers have and review some of the guys in this class as we continue here on PittsburghPanthers.com. And welcome back to the Pitt Livewire National Letter of Intent Day special. Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic, and we have another signee through that dreaded fax machine. Devin Edwards out of Eastmoor Academy in the Columbus area. Here's another kid who comes in at that position of tight end, 6'4", 255. As you look at the list, Aaron Reese, Zach Challingsworth, Luke McLean, Chris Blewett, James Conner, Dorian Johnson, and the newest Devin Edwards. At that size, when you look at the numbers of tight ends that the Panthers have right now, do you think maybe some of those guys move to a tackle position, or there is some flexibility from the tight end spot?
I think so. I think he's a guy, number one, tight end's really the extension of the offensive line, but it's also a hybrid with a receiver. So you've got natural position flexibility at that spot itself. I think obviously this staff likes tight ends. It's a pro-style offense. They want to run the football, play action pass. When you get those matchups with linebackers, particularly with a guy like Devin Edwards, who's 6'5", 240 pounds, that's a matchup advantage. He moves well. You throw the ball up to him, he can elevate for the football. You watch this right here. Throw it up to him in the end zone, big target, elevates. You get a safety or linebacker matched up with him, a guy who's 6'2", 6'1". There's a height advantage. Reminds me a little bit of a guy like Darryl Strong, but you see what kind of player he could become in line. If he could become a blocker, which is going to be the first thing Coach Joe Rudolph, who works at tight ends, is going to work on. Block. If you can block like J.P. Holtz, if you can become that kind of guy, you're going to naturally invite matchup problems because you're going to elicit that eighth guy coming down into the box to stop the run if you're able to run the football. And then you can get out and play action and become a real threat in the passing game.
Out of Eastmoor Academy in Reynoldsburg, Ohio, and it's an opportunity for him. You mentioned blocking. Obviously, it's something he has to do in the offense. But is that something where you really win the support of the coaches? If you show you're going to give that effort, then maybe you'll get to do some other things. Is that how it works?
Completely. Yeah, it's first thing is, can you be relied upon to do your most basic job, which would be running the football. The foundation of this offense, it's no secret, is running the football. You got Russell Shell returning. You've got some guys that are going to be on that offensive line that have played a lot of football. It's going to start running the football, and Russell Shell's a guy who's going to demand 25 to 30 carries. So if you can get out there and show you can block first and foremost, that opens the door for a lot of other stuff, for a lot of other ways you could become involved offensively. And really, if you're able to do that, you can become a prominent player and play a lot of snaps.
Earlier we talked to Scott Orndoff, and he's a guy who can get down the field vertically, and maybe Edwards can do that as well. How does that open up the offense for a quarterback when your tight end not only could block, but can present an issue down the middle of the field?
It's huge because in those situations on third down, Mike Shanahan really, with the injuries of that position, became a guy who played inside. We saw his impact playing as that third receiver in a three-receiver formation to the field, working against linebackers. So you have that out. If teams want to spread out to cover guys like Devin Street and they want to have safety help, that's going to open up the middle of the field. Contrastly, if a tight end is demanding the attention of a safety, a split safety, for instance, and he's down in the middle of the field and he occupies the safety, you're one-on-one outside. So it's a cat and mouse game, and tight ends give you the ability to really manipulate a defense. I love tight ends. I know Paul Christ and Joe Rudolph love tight ends because of what they do for an offense.
So far, there's a kicker, a receiver, a running back, two offensive linemen, and a defensive lineman, kind of filling some of the gaps that we had talked about earlier. Defensive line, there is one leader of that defensive line and playmaker from that defensive line. Aaron Donald, guy is going to come into his last year. What a season he had last year. A little bit of a slow start, but they really got that D-line going.
The tackles for loss, the type of splash plays he makes, you just can't replicate the type of explosiveness he has. He has quickly become one of the best interior defensive linemen we've seen here at Pitt in a long time. He's bigger than Mick Williams, has the same type of athleticism, and just wreaks havoc. He demands two blockers. So he is going to create for people around him. But naturally, if people around him are good and demand attention, he's going to have those dreaded one-on-one matchups, and he is just going to destroy other teams. He was dominant towards the end of that season. I had never seen a guy. He was in the opponent's backfield more than he was in his three-point stance. It was impressive.
Especially against South Florida. He was basically in the huddle.
Yeah, it was like a swinging gate. They might as well just let him go because it was almost like he got more charged up and more energy when someone tried to put a hand on him. If you would have let him go, he might have fallen down or something.
And a reminder, the hashtag is Pitt Livewire, but one of the cool things we get to do here on Livewire is really get behind the scenes with some of these kids. Here's a chance for you to see Aaron Donald behind the scenes, all access right here on Livewire.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Lincoln, Leamington. That's by East Liberty, not too far from campus. And you gotta love Pittsburgh. It's a football city. So, and I'm a football, and I love football. I've been doing it since I was 5, 6 years old. I grew up a quiet guy, if you can't tell. I really wasn't a talker, so anytime I got the opportunity to go on a football field, I was able to express myself, and that's how I am now. I'm gonna turn into an animal when I'm on a football field.
What people need to know about Aaron Donald is he's a tremendous worker, prepares.
He's a very serious guy that takes a lot of pride in everything he does. A very hard worker. You can see it on the field.
It means a lot to me to be a part of this university because I grew up watching Pitt. Always was a big Pitt fan. Wanted to play for Pitt all my life, so I got the opportunity, and I love it. Third down. Second quarterback. I'm second. Hey, you got the call? You first.
You know what? He's an intense player. I mean, very intense player, smart player. Recognizes things, you know, a lot of guys don't recognize.
Right. G. The best thing about being a defensive lineman is you get to hit somebody every single play. That's always a plus.
I mean, he's a pro about things.
Welcome back. It's the beauty of live television. Pitt Livewire is the hashtag, and you're over here like Adam Schefter with your phone, checking out all the latest stuff, and there is a question for you.
We do have a question. We do have a question at the Pitt Livewire hashtag from Matt Presto. What do you think about the idea of James Conner being in the backfield himself rather than blocking for Shell? I love it. I think he'd be great. I think there's situations where he can be a pass protector for whoever is going to win that quarterback competition. When you look at the guys involved with Tom Savage and Wojtek and Chapman. But I also like him draws, powers, inside, becoming a one-back type player who can spell Russell Shell. You don't know what a guy's going to be able to do until he gets here. I want to see him involved in camp. I want to see what he can do. But if he has the ability to get and be in the backfield himself, similar to what, again, to not belabor the reference, but what Henry was able to do, where he can both run the football block, you have the opportunity to really keep a defense on their heels.
And a reminder, get those questions in to hashtag Pitt Livewire. We'll talk about the guys who have signed to play at the University of Pittsburgh, and we'll break down any questions you might have. Here's one of the things I like about what Wisconsin did when Paul was there, is that depending on who they had, they would change their systems. They had a running type quarterback, a dual threat. They changed that with Russell Wilson. If they had the straight drop back passer, they'd have that type of impact. Now, while he always wants to focus on the run, he is flexible, and I like that about a program where you're not just going to put guys into a meat grinder, if you will. You're going to see what they have, and then you're going to change the offense to fit that.
Absolutely. Your talent, it's a player's game. Your players dictate what you do offensively, defensively, on special teams. And last year is a case in point. I mean, they were in one back far more last year just because of the lack of depth at both tight end and fullback at times, particularly with Hubie Graham being injured. Jubilato had some nagging injuries throughout the year. So getting into one-back sets was more part of the offense. So they were running one-back runs, and they got really good at them towards the end of the season, those one-back runs. So you're never set in stone to what you're doing. You're not going to put a square peg into a round hole. So definitely the personnel will dictate that. And you want to get good football players, so you have – it's a good problem to have when you say, we've got 3 good running backs, we've got 8 good receivers, we've got 4 good tight ends. Let's find a way to make it all work. That's building an offensive system. That's the journey that is a season, and it starts in spring ball.
It's funny. I felt like you the other day. I was stopped in the store, and somebody asked me, so why didn't Pitt, just redshirt Russell Shell? Why would they waste a season? Tell us what he learned from this year and having Ray Graham with him in that backfield and what you expect from Russell Shell in his sophomore year.
Well, clearly, he's a good enough player to play. He would not have been put on the field if he wasn't ready to play, and the impact he had was felt. That Virginia Tech game, they get 159 yards and some bone-shattering runs. I mean, he crippled some guys with the runs.
VTech remembers it.
I mean, they remember it, and they'll remember it when we go to Blacksburg this year. It's impressive what type of player he is, and I think what he's learned is where he needs to get better. He got a taste of it. Now, he got a taste of it because he wasn't ready to be out there every play. He wasn't ready to pass protect. That wasn't up to par yet. Understanding schemes, understanding run cuts, run adjustments, understanding what's involved in that entire process. As being a running back, you have run reads in college. It's not just, hey, Russell, run right. Hey, Russell, run left. It's, hey, Russell, if A-gap's cut, you're going to cut it back. This is our entry point. If this happens, boom. There's all this, give and take, and you have to be ready for that. So there's a cerebral part to college football that he's still getting better at. If he gets there to the point where he can, if he makes that jump this year, he'll be scary good.
Yeah, and he'll be the feature back, but Isaac Bennett is back as well, and there's going to be some competition for other time that's not Russell's.
Absolutely. I mean, Malcolm Crockett got involved, got his hands dirty a little bit in the bowl game. Isaac Bennett, a guy who was very good in screens, excellent on special teams. Crockett and Bennett both were excellent on special teams. And with obviously James Conner coming into the fold, you've got a backfield. We've seen freshman running backs have impacts here at Pitt. Now, you don't have to go far back to see it. Deion Lewis, Ray Graham, Shady McCoy, and Shady's obviously a little bit different going to prep school. But still, you've seen guys come in and have an immediate impact. Russell Shell's the next in line, but now it's his time to be the guy. And behind the guy, you've got to have backup. We've talked about it at length, that you have to have depth at that position because it's a violent game. And there's no more 30, 35, 40 carries, at least not every game.
Well, Pat, you mentioned special teams, and we've talked about the kickers. But what about return men? For years, relied on Cam Sadler to be that guy. There's Ronald Jones. We saw Lafayette Pitt return some kicks next year. Where do you see who are some guys that can step into those roles for the Panthers?
Lafayette Pitts, I thought, had a really good year returning kicks. For a while there, he was tops in the Big East Conference and had one of the better return averages in the country. It fell off a little bit because teams started kicking away from him. But I thought he had a very good impact. I think he'll remain at that position. Reminds you kind of having that Revis-type mentality where he's very good with the ball in his hands, too. And as a ball-hawking type of corner, he's only going to get better. Ronald Jones, South Florida, big return against South Florida on the punt return situation. And he also did that going back 2 years now when he was a freshman because Cam was in and out with injury after that Connecticut game in 2011 where he hurt his chest. And Ronald became the feature returner. On punts at least, and was great. So I think you've got playmaking potential at both those spots. You've got to get some depth there. Brendan Felder got some spots on kickoff return. Who's going to back up? Mike Shanahan was one of the backups for punt return. Who's going to be that next guy on punt return? We'll see. K'Wan Williams is taken. We'll see who becomes that guy that if Jones can't do it, who's the guy?
You're watching the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special here on Pitt Panthers Television. Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic. In the NFL, most rookies, unless you're a quarterback or an absolute superstar running back or receiver, you cut your teeth on special teams. Same with freshmen in college? Or is it a little different?
It's a little different because you can't redshirt in the pros. You do cut your teeth on scout team like you do in the pros sometimes. You do cut your teeth, obviously earning a job. Most guys aren't just placed in a position unless you're a high-round draft pick in the NFL. But certainly I think when you get past that redshirt year, that's a place where you can earn your keep. You talked earlier about Dorian Dickerson. Here's a guy who played a lot of special teams, even through his All-American senior season. Nate Byam played special teams, but had an impact his freshman year. I think everyone cuts their teeth on special teams. If you've got 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense, and 7 of them on both sides of the ball contribute on special teams and can handle that load, that's impressive.
And it's an opportunity for guys like Connor, for guys like McLean, as we're going to check back to the list of guys who have signed so far. Aaron Reese, Zach Challingsworth, Luke McLean, Chris Blewett, James Conner, Dorian Johnson, and Devin Edwards. But for some of those young fullbacks, linebackers, that is a great opportunity to get out there, and it's just raw football. Just show us what you got.
It is, but it's also a chance to show that you can handle it because, again, there's strategy involved in special teams. It's not just kick it and chase after it. You can show that you can be responsible, that you can handle the game plan. So certainly it's a great chance for these guys to get to know what kind of players they are because you learn a lot about guys on special teams because you've got to be a little bit of a headhunter if you're chasing that ball down. And I can remember Notre Dame with Isaac Bennett and Malcolm Crockett talking about cutting their teeth. I thought they did great this year on special teams. And some of these freshmen, there's no question, will be involved in that fold this year. So
Zach Challingsworth was the second to sign. There are some opportunities at the receiver position. We've mentioned Shanahan. Ray Graham caught a bunch of passes for this team. He'll be gone. Of course, Cam Sadler also gone. And the tight end, Hubie Graham, is also gone. I know he dealt with injuries, and J.P. Holt stepped in and played admirably as a freshman. But there are some chances to get out there and catch the football.
Yeah, I think there are some chances to complement Devin Street. Ed Tinker came on at the end of the season against Rutgers with a big touchdown catch and really was good. In the later part of the season, we can see what Drew Carswell turns into. He's tight end. He's a guy also who can play, in that slot position, take Mike Shanahan's type of role on third down. So I like the receiving core they have. I certainly think they can add to it. Got to add depth, and I think Coach Bobby Ingram has done a fabulous job with that group.
So 7 have faxed in their letter of intent so far. 4 are already enrolled in school. We're going to talk to one of those 4 as we continue here on Pitt Live Wire's National Letter of Intent Day Special. Welcome back to the National Letter of Intent Day special here on Pitt Live Wire. Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic as we're here with you until 11:30 this morning, bringing you the latest on the guys who have signed. And there are also 4 guys who are already enrolled in classes. We talked to Scott Orndoff a little earlier. Shakir Soto joins us now live on set. Shakir, welcome to Panther Nation.
Thank you.
Tell us what it came down to for you. What was it about Pitt? Why was the decision best for you to be here?
Just the surroundings. It's a great atmosphere here. Like my first game I came to was a Virginia Tech game, and we upset them. It was just awesome, and everybody was just great about it. And I want to study pharmacy, so that was a big thing too. And just the coaches just welcoming. They're just like it's just like one of my brothers, just so down to earth.
How crucial is that visit and seeing the atmosphere and seeing how the guys are? What percentage do you put on that when you're making your decision?
It's just 100% everything. Pitt's just a great city in general. It's a big city, and just everything about it is just awesome.
Now, when did you make the decision to come early? And give us some insight into the reasoning behind making that early move.
I think I made the decision on my junior day, and I was with Scott Orndoff, and he was telling me about how he was going in early, and then that's when Coach Kabbalah asked me about it if he wanted me to talk about coming early. And I was like, yeah. So I went home and talked to my family about it, and they said it was a great idea. So I talked to coaches about it, and that's when I made the move to come in early.
You went to the Grand Army of the Republic High School.
Yeah, GAR Memorial.
In the Wilkes-Barre area. You're 6'3", 230, defensive lineman. But the stat that jumps out to me, you had 52 sacks.
Yeah, throughout my whole GAR career.
Now Trey Chapman's going to join us a little later. I'm sure he doesn't like that stat. But how in the world were you able to get 52 sacks?
I don't know. It's just I'm that good.
Wow. I love it. He's waving at the camera. He's confident. I love it.
I mean, do you feel like you have a nose for the football? We were talking about intangibles earlier.
Yeah, no matter where the ball is, I'm always at least 5 yards away from it. If I'm making a tackle or not, I'm always by the ball.
Now, how fortunate do you feel, and how excited are you for spring ball to get playing again real quick? You just ended your high school career. You're on campus. You start classes. You're living on your own. But how anxious are you to play football again and get in the mix here at Pitt?
It's exciting, not a lot of people get this opportunity to be able to play in the spring game, so it's a great feeling that it's right around the corner, and practice starting soon, so it's going to be exciting.
I don't think I've ever seen a pick six where no one followed you in the score.
Yeah.
We were wide open. You were able to prance right in there and score. Where do you see how much weight do you want to gain? Where do you set goals on that line, that level to get yourself prepared for what college will be like?
Well, right now I'm 245 right now, and I'm trying to get up to like about 255, 260. So that's my goal.
What is that weight room difference like from high school and now being here?
It's a lot different. It's harder, but there's more people there to push you in college than there is in high school. So it's the football team here doesn't let you down. All your teammates, they're all great. They're great leaders out there. So
I've heard there's been some, talk about how you've been quite the recruiter too. Now, you've been involved with some of the guys in your class. Without getting into specifics, I know those stories stay in house. But how has that been? Being a part of a class, I remember what that was like. But to get to know these guys and kind of form, kind of a band of brothers.
It's great. Every time I found out there's a news, somebody new that we're recruiting, I always go and hit them up and see what their thoughts are about Pitt and just talk to them about it. I told them I'm there for them, and I mean it. Like, no matter where you go. Like, when Dorian committed to Penn State, I told him right after that, I was like, don't lose my number. We'll still be brothers and stuff. But then I think that, he made him feel comfortable. And then after he decommitted, I talked to him. And then I'm not saying that's the reason he committed to Pitt, but, just make sure he knew I was there for him and stuff like that. I do that with everybody, and I mean it, so.
Defensive lineman Shakir Soto is joining us here at this Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special. Why was Coach Christ right? What was it that he said to you that you liked? I know it wasn't just him, but what about him did you like and you entrusted him to your college career?
He's just that guy. Like, he's a really cool coach, I always before, with the old coaching staff with Graham and them, I was getting recruited by them. And then when the new coaching staff with Coach Chris came in, I wanted to go to Pitt before that too, but then that's when I thought they lost me in the shuffle. So I'm like, all right. So then that's when I got invited to junior day, and he gave me an offer one-on-one, and he put me in a private room and offered me, and then that was just one of the most exciting moments of my life. And then that's when I came back with the commit with the birthday card and stuff.
For those of us who haven't experienced it, what is that like, that feeling like when your place offers you, and then now you've already enrolled, so signing day isn't as big a deal because you're already here, but that first day on campus, meeting the guys, can you give us an idea emotionally what that's like for a young man?
Well, the first day I got here, I was sitting here because they were at the bowl game. So we were sitting there for hours just waiting for them to get back. And then when they got back, they're all excited, saying what's up and all that. It was a great feeling. It was just welcoming myself to my new family.
Is it an opportunity for you? Do you see it right away? Are you patient enough to know that, hey, maybe a red shirt's best for me? Or do you even think about that yet?
No, I'm not really focusing on that right now. Just doing, lifting and conditioning right now. So I'm just trying to focus on that, and then whatever happens after that happens.
There's another defensive lineman on the team right now who has a pretty good nose for the ball, and Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
Do you watch? I mean, what do you try to learn from other guys when you watch them, whether it's at the Virginia Tech game, on film, or in practice?
Wherever, I'll just learn from them. When they correct me, just do what they say because, they've been here and they've been through everything. So I just got to follow their footsteps with conditioning, lifting, and football.
Now, in the recruiting process, I know in different coaching staffs and things of that nature, but looking at kind of the pedigree of defensive ends that have played here at Pitt, some of the guys I play with Greg Romeus and watching Jabal Shear play for the Browns, how much of a motivating factor was that for you to say, I want to be that next guy?
Just gotta keep pushing. I want to be that next guy. So I just gotta do everything I could to do what they did to be able to be that next guy.
Well, he's a very confident Shakir Soto, and we look forward to your career here at the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you for joining us. One of the other young men who have come in early and enrolled in school, Trayvon Chapman. He's going to join us next as we continue Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day Special. And welcome back to the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day Special. Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic. Trayvon Chapman is going to join us. First, we have a Twitter question that was directed to Pat and about fax machines, I believe.
Yeah, we were talking about it earlier, and I'm pretty sure this is the case, but Brian Tuttle, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, are recruits required to use a fax machine, or are they permitted to scan and email the letter? I'm pretty sure it's a fax machine process.
It is. You have to.
Yeah. I
assumed
it was just a fax machine process because we can't mention anybody until it comes through the fax machine. It must literally come out the fax machine and be signed and sealed and delivered. for us to even make mention of that individual. So I assumed, and I guess it's the truth, that it has to be a old-fashioned fax.
You ever faxed anything, Trey?
No, I'm not really. Never.
We have two guys who have joined Trey and the recruiting class. Let's update you on the list of recruits that we have in. Zach Poker has officially signed to play at the University of Pittsburgh, along with Ryan Winslow. Poker's a linebacker out of Wisconsin, out of a high school that if I try to pronounce, we'd be here all day.
Economowalk.
You got it?
I've been
wow,
working
look
on
at
it.
you. Ryan Winslow is a punter out of LaSalle College High School in Ambler, Pennsylvania. We want to take an opportunity now. Young man out of Kent, Ohio, Trayvon Chapman, a dual. How do you consider yourself? You hear this dual threat athletic quarterback, or you just, I'm a quarterback.
Yeah, I think of it as I'm a quarterback that happens to be an athlete. You know, sometimes they stereotype quarterbacks as dual threat pocket passers and things like that. But if you're a quarterback, you're a quarterback. You can do. I just happen to be able to run and pass at the same time. So I don't look at it as a big deal. They can call me a dual threat, but I rather prefer just a quarterback in general.
I'm going to ask you kind of a loaded question, and it's kind of complex, but I'm going to try to simplify
Okay.
it. As you're going through the recruiting process and talking to Paul Christ, and you hear the word pro-style offense involved,
Right.
and you've seen what he's been able to do at Wisconsin, how much did you look at what he did with Russell Wilson and what the productivity he's had not only at Wisconsin with the Seattle Seahawks and say, you know what, pro-style offense, I get it,
Right.
but it can be adapted, and I can succeed in that. I want to play in that.
That was a huge factor in the whole process. You know, a lot of schools that offered me were spread schools, and I've played spread all my life in high school. And then, you know, people started comparing me to Russell Wilson. And when I got to talking with my family and, you know, people hired coaches and things like that at other colleges, you know, I decided that to get to the next level after college, you know, you have to play in the pro style as well. So this is just a new opportunity for me to learn a different offense and master something different. And you seen what Russell Wilson did in a year at Wisconsin. So I figure if he did that in a year at Wisconsin, me doing something for 4 years here could be just great.
Now, you rushed for over 1,500 yards in your last 2 years combined, nearly 6,000 yards passing, 81 touchdowns. We're going to take a look at some of your highlights. I want you to watch here with us. Explain some of the things you were able to do. Those numbers are just ridiculous in high school.
Yeah,
I mean, here you are.
This is unbelievable. I mean,
running around in the end zone. The
55
coach is probably thinking, what are you doing?
That's just me improvising. You know, I didn't want to run that out. I figured I wouldn't get too far, but you know, part of being an athlete and is making plays and improvising and stuff like that and getting the ball to, you know, my teammates. So that's what I like to do, and that's what my highlight shows.
Now, you've been known to have an extremely strong work ethic. When you watch yourself, and the highlight tapes are sometimes misleading because you're watching all the good plays.
Right.
But where's your focus? Is it, hey, I did this great, or I can do this better?
Every time for a quarterback, I know in my instance, is what can I do better? Every day in the weight room, every day in class, and on the field, it's like I go back and watch film, like what could I do better? What did they do to stop me? You know, why wasn't that throw good enough and things like that. So that's just part of, you know, becoming better as a quarterback.
Your father was a football coach, correct?
Right.
When did you really get the itch? Did you just follow him around like a puppy, if you will, and just want to learn everything from him because that's what Daddy did?
I followed him around since I was like 3, going to two-a-days and things like that, track, basketball, and football. And then I say 8th grade, it just snapped. That's when I hit the weight room hard. I really wanted to be involved in football, and I knew that's something I really wanted to do. And I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And then once I moved to Kent Roosevelt in Ohio, it just hit me because, you know, I didn't play my freshman or sophomore year at varsity, so I wanted to play as a junior, and it just hit me. I gained weight, got a lot stronger in the weight room, so that's where the motivation came from.
Obviously, you got all the tools. Watching that highlight tape, can throw on the move, can throw rolling left, rolling right, strong arm, athletic. But coming here now, new team,
right?
New 4 years, new opportunity. You've obviously met with Coach Brooks Bollinger, a guy who's got an outstanding career playing the position. What has he communicated to you to say, Trey, for the next 4 or 5 months till we get to training camp, this is what we're going to focus on? What has been the biggest thing that he's tried to impart on you?
You know, that the highlight tape and all that, the high school stuff, basically the high school stuff is over. What I did in high school is it's not erased, but it's in the back of people's mind. He's just saying come in here with a good work ethic, the ability to learn. You know, I got a playbook. I have to study that every night. Actually, after this, I'll probably go to class and then come back and study the playbook and watch film. You know, it's just basically getting a feel for my teammates, working hard in the weight room, and then getting to know the hang of the plays because spring ball is right around the corner.
With all due respect to whomever backed you up in high school, I'm sure the competition isn't what it's going to be. When you meet Tom, you meet Chad, you meet Trey Anderson.
Right.
What's it like with the quarterbacks? You all want the same job,
Right.
but yet you want to make each other better.
This is why I say Pittsburgh is a unique place because there's not been one awkward moment between us like, oh, he's coming in to take our job. You know, it's the first day I came in, you know, Tom and Trey introduced themselves, and me and Chad, we met on my official visit. So there hasn't been any talk of, hey, you know, so-and-so is talking behind your back, things like that. It's just cool. And I could say we're like a group. We're starting to become a group of brothers. And it's good because they're kind of taking me under their wing. You know, Tom's showing me the ropes. He's been in a lot of different places. Trey's been here. And then Chad got the red shirt. So if I do get the red shirt, he gives me that other perspective.
Does that bother you, maybe the red shirt, or do you think that can be an advantage?
I try not to think about it, but of course everybody does. If I came early to play, that was the goal. So I didn't, graduate high school just, to sit out. But if I do redshirt, it's not a bad thing at all. I still get 4 years, and then I get a year to learn, and then get better physically and mentally and all that stuff. So I could be ready to, step on the field as a redshirt freshman.
We're joined by Trayvon Chapman, who has enrolled early at the University of Pittsburgh, one of 4 to do so. Shakir Soto was here before you. He had 52 sacks. Could he get you?
No, Shakir, that's my my boy, but I don't think he's fast enough to catch me. So the 52 sacks, they get canceled out.
Having just talked to him, I think he probably begged to differ on that.
Yeah,
pretty confident guy.
He says he's 5 yards away from the ball. In my case, he'll probably be 20 to 25, 30 maybe.
I love it.
And, of course, Shakir's still in the room for those of you who can't see it on TV. Trey, I want to ask you this, kind of dovetailing off what Pat said. Like when Terrell Pryor committed to college, when he would look at the NFL, there wasn't somebody with his skill set that was really given an opportunity. Now, when you look at the NFL, you look at what Kaepernick has done. Right. Russell Wilson has great feet, and of course RG3, what he did in Washington. Do you think your skills, as you look beyond and maybe making this a profession for yourself, that wow, this is the time for me because NFLs are starting to recognize my talents, or what maybe I can do in the future? Yeah,
that's a good way of putting it. NFL used to be just all pro style, just hand it off, play action, things like that. But now you see a lot of gun, pistol, guys rolling outside the pocket. So it's definitely exciting for a guy like me. But in the meantime, I try not to think about
some things
the
to
next,
do between now and then.
That's a long 4 to 5 years, so I try not to think about the next step. But it's definitely appealing to a quarterback, like athletic quarterback.
Talk about being a freshman and coming in with the mindset you want to play. You got the chance to watch a freshman last year play right away in Russell Shell. You probably haven't handed the ball off too often in high school. If you got that opportunity to play, what's it going to be like playing with a guy like Russell?
Oh man, Russell, he's great. That's a big hard-working dude. To be able to hand the ball off to someone like that broke Tony Dorsett's records and just a hard worker, it'd just be great, and it'd take some of the load off of me as well. Like you said, in high school, I was in shotgun. I rarely handed the ball off because I like to keep it in my hands. But it's just I would be comfortable handing the ball off to Russell. I know what he did as a freshman, so as a sophomore, I know he'll do even bigger things.
Quarterback Trayvon Chapman, congratulations.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck. I know Shakir wants a word with you after we're done here, so good luck with that as well.
Thank you.
We'll update our list right here. It's the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special right here at PittsburghPanthers.com. It is the Pitt Livewire National Letter of Intent Day special. We're with you until 11:30 with those who have signed with the University of Pittsburgh. Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic. Don Rebel from MSA will join us coming up at 9:30. No one knows high school better than Don, and he'll be able to really tell us more about some of these kids and what we can expect from them. 9 have signed so far with the University of Pittsburgh. Some come from the area. And, of course, a reminder, 7 o'clock local time. So, for instance, there may be some people out of this time zone that sign who haven't signed yet just because they're not allowed to. Aaron Reese was the first to sign, followed by Zach Challingsworth, Luke McLean, Chris Blewett, James Connor, Dorian Johnson out of Bell Vernon, Devin Edwards, Zach Poker, and Ryan Winslow. So I have a couple of kickers, receiver, we have a quarterback in with Trayvon Chapman. We had a nice chat with him just a couple of minutes ago, and a couple of guys on that offensive line. General impressions of the kids who have signed so far of what the Panthers have received.
I think it's a solid group. I really do. I like from the standpoint of really having the foundation be up front. It's going to be very important to really get that group going, to get into the ACC for the first time, really to get this thing going, to play some really good defenses, get that run game going with those offensive linemen. Tight ends, really a big part of it too. I like the start of this class.
Yeah, and it's a class that will be in the ACC for the first time. It's one made not just for the ACC conference, but what are fans going to notice that's going to be different when they jump into this conference that they didn't see in the Big East, or will there be a different style that we'll see from teams in that conference?
On the whole, I mean, obviously there's more teams, and I think it's better competition week in, week out. I think you've got programs that are competing for championships and are playing in high-level bowl games, and I think just week in and week out the competition level is going to be better. Different type of player, not so much. Maybe on the whole there's more spread option when you look at teams like North Carolina. Virginia Tech did a little bit of it last year with Logan Thomas. He's coming back. You look at the speed you're going to get with a team like Florida State, an ACC champion last year. Very good team, beat Northern Illinois in a bowl game. So I think you're going to see better competition. But really, as far as football, it's still football. You just have to be ready to go. And really, I think the most important thing getting into the ACC is to really brand yourself the right way and start building this program. This is Paul Chryst now going into his second year, first full recruiting class. When the competition is heightened up and the level of play has to increase, recruiting is a huge part of that.
Well, it does give the coaching staff some solid ground when other, maybe coaches in the past would say, well, Big East, who knows what their future is. Now when you go out and recruit with Pitt, we're in the ACC, and the ACC is here to stay.
Absolutely. It's a long-term home, and I think you look at the opponents, the slate of opponents that we're looking forward to coming this year. It's impressive. This is the best schedule I've seen since I've been here. I mean, far and away.
Yeah, it's Florida State at home.
Miami, Notre Dame. I mean, you're going to places like Duke to play against
North Carolina's here,
Virginia. It's impressive, and that's the exciting thing. You want to play these kind of games. That's why you come to a place like Pitt. Pitt belongs in these kind of games. So going to the ACC, playing this kind of competition, having these kind of schools, that's the most important thing about this ACC move. Football becomes football, but it's at an onus now having these type of teams to play against.
We have an opportunity to update you on the list. Tony Harper has now signed as well. He's a tight end out of the Toledo area. And Jester Weah has also come aboard. He's one of the last guys to verbally commit out of Wisconsin.
Yeah, two guys that I think both are impressive guys. Harper's a smaller tight end, but I think has a kind of little Drew Carswell feel to him, very athletic, a guy who played some wide receiver. Jester Weah, a very athletic guy who's only played football for a couple years out of Wisconsin, out of the Madison area. Watched some film of him playing basketball, impressive, can really leap. A raw football talent when it comes to route running and things like that, but big frame, fast, quick in and out of breaks. He gets polished and he's going to get polished with Bobby Ingram. I really like these two guys. You look at Harper's tape right now. Impressive, played on both sides of the ball, is also a safety/linebacker. A really good football player and a guy who, again, could play at multiple spots. That's an advantage. I think will end up at that tight end position because he gives you that athletic side to that, which is certainly a good thing.
Also a guy who could play on the defensive side. What kind of advantage, as we look at some of his tape, for these kids, and most of them get to play both ways, when you're learning both sides of it, when you finally settle on one, to know the other, can you quantify what that advantage is like?
At certain positions, it's extremely valuable. Playing offensive and defensive line. I mean, talking to Shakir Soto, he's a guy, a lot of these defensive ends that are really athletic, he played tackle on offense. They see him pulling and stuff. He was unbelievable. He gets to know certain things you can look at defensive end. A guy's weight on his hands, or his knuckles white. Is he a guy that's going to, when he's down blocking, he's going to be real heavy on his hand. Little intricacies you can learn. But playing tight end and safety, you get a chance to look at maybe coverages. A guy cheating a coverage, a guy tipping you off, a guy giving you some clues as to what the coverages might help your route running, might help you clue into whether or not you're going to be targeted on that play. So very, very much an advantage to have knowledge of both sides.
And at 6'4", 200 pounds, he has some weight where he can go. Also signing, as we mentioned, as we went through the list now, 10 with the Panthers, Zach Poker. I mean, here's a young man, linebacker position. What are some of the things that stood out to you about this young man?
Very athletic. Very athletic. He's put together, a good frame, and very physical and aggressive. I like the way he plays the game. He's a violent football player, a guy who seems to really love the game. Very fast. There's a couple plays where he tracks guys down where it is just impressive, his speed. And that's going to be at a premium. We talk about the ACC. That's the one thing I didn't make mention of earlier, but should. Playing these fast teams. I mean, Florida State, they can line up in a pro. They can line up in a wishbone. Georgia Tech's going to give you that type of wishbone option look where there's going to be speed on the field. And those outside linebackers, you look at guys like Todd Thomas, Anthony Gonzalez, Eric Williams. They can move. That is important because you're going to have to play in space. You're not going to be honkered in the box playing against lead blocks all the time. That's just not going to happen very much in today's college football. Certain conferences, it's more prominent than others, but this spread offense is alive. It's very much a part of the ACC. When you look at North Carolina with what they've had going down there, a good year this year at 8-4. You look at this, Georgia Tech, having those athletic linebackers who can play in the slot and cover the pass. A guy like Zach Poker comes to mind. That's going to be extremely, extremely important.
Economawalk High School.
There you go. You got it.
And he has an opportunity at the linebacker position for the Panthers to, at 6'4", 220, again, more weight he can put on. But when the depth the Panthers have at linebacker this year, here's another kid who have the ability to redshirt and really get to learn this defense.
Absolutely. This linebacker position, there's a lot of bodies there. And I'll be interested to see who comes steps up. In the middle linebacker position, I think, obviously, with Shane Gordon returning, guy who played there last year, like to see him become more of a leader, more vocal. I think he can do that, going to be a senior. So it'll be interesting to follow that. You look at Todd Thomas playing the outside position, really came on really after that Louisville, that block punt. I thought he was impressive all year long. Anthony Gonzalez, UConn, a sack.
You like him?
I really like him. I like his athleticism. I like Eric Williams, a guy who was hampered a little bit by that broken thumb, or he had that cast on, but had some big plays. He had a pick against Notre Dame, which was huge. I really like this linebacker group, and you like guys coming back. Nick Grigsby coming back. He played a lot last year in the beginning of the year, but got ushered out. Manny Williams came in, then got hurt. Then you started seeing Todd Thomas come back. So where's Nick Grigsby going to come back into the fold? Where's a guy like Juan Price going to come back into the fold? Where's his impact going to be felt? Then you look at the younger guys like Bam Bradley, Deshaun Rippey. You look at guys like inside it, Mike Caprera. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can never have a shortage of linebackers because they're athletic. They're guys who can some of them play safety? Can Bradley or Rippey play a safety? There's a lot of depth, a lot to choose from. It'll be nice to see how it's siphoned out and who wins the jobs.
Yeah, you like when you have that competition. The guys that can push each other, and then you have the opportunity to push somebody back. I also want to mention Ryan Winslow, who's the punter who was able to come in. You've got Matt Yoklik for another year, so he gets a chance to come in and watch from one of the best. Yoklik had a solid year last year for the Panthers.
He did. He really did. Punting's huge. Field position is such a big part of college football, and it doesn't get stressed enough. And punting is such a huge part of that. Interesting tidbit about Ryan Winslow, reading his bio courtesy of Mr. E.J. Borghetti, is his dad, George Winslow, was, I think, the first scholarship punter at Wisconsin, and then transferred to a school nearby. I think it was Villanova or somebody, Delaware, something like that, but played in the NFL a little bit. So he's got a little bit of a pedigree. So we'll see what he becomes. Big kid. And those punters with that long lever can really, it's amazing how high they kick the ball, and that's a huge advantage.
A reminder, our hashtag for social media is hashtag Pitt Livewire, and our list for the National Letter of Intent so far for the University of Pittsburgh. Aaron Reese was the first to go through it, and then, of course, Zach Challingsworth was next, and opportunity to fill some positions. Chris Blewett, James Conner, Devin Edwards also through, Tony Harper, Dorian Johnson, Luke McClain, Zach Poker, and Ryan Winslow. So as we look at this list of guys, and there are going to be more coming, and again to explain, 7 o'clock a.m. is the first time local time where you could send in yours. Jester Wea was able to get his in early as the clock turned, if you will. I want to get back to Wea just for a second. I like the fact that maybe he's a late bloomer. When you're recruiting some of these high school kids, how do you know when a kid's going to really come into his own? And if you see somebody towards the back end, how do you know when an 18-year-old, if he's fully physically mature then, or is he going to be that way in 21?
You don't. That's the beauty of it. And it's good to have guys that are going to wave, and some guys that are going to bloom earlier and become impact players sooner, and some guys that are going to redshirt and have to learn. I've seen it both ways with guys that haven't had a lot of experience playing the game of football. I mean, Jeff Otok comes to mind. A guy didn't play much football, came in and became a force and was a first-round draft pick. Took him a year at a prep school, but he got into it, came in, had a couple years, played really good football. Jester Wea, guy's only played football for 3 years. He's athletic. He's got a body. He certainly loves the game and seems to really love Pitt and is excited about this opportunity. I like that as it stands to be a springboard for him. He's going to come and have to learn like everybody else. Maybe the learning curve is a little bit longer for him, but that's part of it. You're going to have certain guys that are going to expedite that process and play, and certain guys are going to have to wait their turn. That's the beauty. If you have a deep program, if you build depth, you're always going to have that discrepancy between certain guys in the recruiting class, and that's just natural.
First real opportunity for Paul Christ to have a full time to get a recruiting class, to get all that together. From the guys that we've seen so far, it seems like he's not only been able to keep some of the key local guys, but you can't just be local. For everyone at home that wants every local player to be here, that's not going to happen. It's not realistic, but you want to get the key guys here, but you also have to look out nationally.
Yeah, and you can't even fathom what the type of chaos he endured coming in last year, right after the bowl game, to try to salvage a recruiting class before signing day. But having a full year now, certainly got to hit the road. You've got to get Western Pennsylvania. You've got to get into Eastern Ohio. You've got to get into Jersey, New York, but get into Wisconsin. I like that. Obviously, he got a chance to know those guys when he was at Wisconsin, but seeing these guys now that are coming to Pitt, it shows the pull. He has the attractiveness of the Pitt football program and what he's brought to it. So certainly he's done a really good job of expanding outside the certain areas that have become accustomed. We've become accustomed to see recruits come to the University of Pittsburgh from into new areas that we necessarily haven't seen before, like Wisconsin.
I think this is the impact of all of those ladies and gentlemen that are working recruiting services. The tag of athlete has become an actual position when kids come into school, and the Panthers have theirs. Reggie Green is the latest Pitt signee from New Jersey, from Cranford, New Jersey, 6'2", 200 pounds. He comes in playing multiple positions, maybe play some safety, maybe play some on the offense. He's a guy with some flexibility.
Absolutely, and a guy who played quarterback in high school. A wildcat type of quarterback position, ran the ball very effectively. Could he be the next in line of good players out of New Jersey? And we've had some success the past 5-6 years with players out of New Jersey. When you look at guys like Ray Graham and you look at K'Wan Williams, you watch him here in that wildcat. He can throw the football, which is impressive. Certainly gives you the ability to experiment a little bit and see what he can do. I like his size. I'm very biased to offense, so I would like to see him play wide out. I think he's got good ball skills at the safety position, which you'll see a little bit later. Can attack the football, breakaway speed, as we see right here. Playing the quarterback position, I think, is going to be valuable for him, as we spoke earlier about just having a knowledge of different spots, and he provides that. He's a good football player. Not enough can be said about that.
We've seen it with T.J. Clemmings, getting the Jersey kids, making sure you maintain that presence on the East Coast. A lot of good football players in that area, and we've said it earlier, Ray Graham, Deion Lewis, guys that have come either from the eastern part of the state or from the Jersey area and come in and been very successful.
Yeah, there's good football players everywhere. Sometimes they're more sparsely populated, per se, but you got to find them, and you got to find the right kids, the kids that want to be a part of Pitt and that want to come and make an impact and see an opportunity for themselves to be a part of something that is much bigger than themselves and bigger than they can imagine. Because this 4-year, 5-year experience, you're going to build some of the closest friends. You're going to have the best experiences of your life. So to go to those areas and be able to get those kids shows the pull that Pitt has and the relevance of this program and what Paul Christ has brought to the table.
57% of guys that are likely to come to the University of Pittsburgh are the offensive linemen and tight ends. What does it say when you see so many of those players coming into a program? What's it tell you about the coaching staff and what they're looking to do?
It shows where their foundation is going to be set. And football is won or lost in the trenches. I don't know if you're spread. I don't care if you're pro style. I don't care if you're wishbone, power eye, any sort of word you want to use to describe offense or defense or whatever. It starts up front. It starts in the trenches. Football is a game of combat inside, and you've got to have guys that are tough, smart, physical, and love contact. And I think having those guys as a foundation is integral because you build around that. That's what they've done at Wisconsin. You look at that as the blueprint. That's going to be referred to a lot as we compare and contrast these Pitt recruiting classes that Paul Chryst is putting together to what they've had at Wisconsin. You look at the offensive linemen that come out of there. Skilled players want to play behind good offensive linemen. That is part of it too.
I feel I should ding a bell, but there is a new guy in Alex Officer, another offensive lineman to add more to that depth as he comes to the University of Pittsburgh. That fax has crossed the machine, and the 6'4", 290-pounder out of Rochester, New York, one of the best players out of New York, is a Pitt Panther.
Absolutely. One of the best players in New York, best offensive line prospect in New York, and a guy who, you're going to pull, get upfield, get to the linebacker level, athletic. Again, you can't say enough about the size of these guys, certainly big frames, but the ability to move, I think it's crucial. You could work with that. It's tougher to get a big menacing guy who's overweight or a guy who's not going to be able necessarily to have the film that shows him moving. Watch him pull there. Look at the athleticism to get to the second level and just throw that guy on the ground. Obviously fits the mold of an offensive lineman that's going to play in a power run style offense.
There are a dozen now who have signed with the University of Pittsburgh. We add that to the 4 others who have enrolled early. We've already heard from 3 of them here on the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special. But Alex Officer is a guy, a lot of schools, BC wanted him, Louisville wanted him, some big programs wanted him. Realistically, for an offensive lineman, how long does it take before you really settle in, for most guys, into the college game?
I think it's like 2 years, usually. I mean, it's the redshirt year is a chance to play scout team, and that kind of wanes off as it goes because a lot of that is providing a look. So you're kind of replicating or giving an offense you're maybe not accustomed to as a part of the scout team. But getting to that second spring ball, their real first spring ball, is when it starts. I think you have training camp, which you get a little taste your freshman year. You go through that freshman year as a redshirt. You come around to that ensuing spring, and that is when I think it really starts the development process because then they're going to get more first team, second team reps. Then they're going to get evaluated on film because the focus in spring is all development. It is all player development. It is all implementation of the playbook. And to have the guys that are here now are getting a first taste of that. They're getting that early. But for this freshman class, the bulk of them is going to come in June or late May. They're going to have to wait about a year and a half until their first spring ball with first opportunity to really develop.
Now, right on the other side of this facility is the Steelers complex, and they are very Mike Tomlin will tell you all the time how much he likes position flexibility. He moves his offensive linemen around. If you watch the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl, Alex Boone, 6'8" at guard. Are we seeing a transformation? Is that just one of those special cases? Or are we going to see some of those bigger guys not just assume that they're going to play tackle, but maybe you're going to see a bigger guy at the guard position?
I think it's the best 5. I don't think you can have any preconceived notions, but if a guy's athletic enough to pull and play guard, if he provides you the best opportunity or the best chance to win at that position, that's his best spot, then he should be there. And no matter if he's 6'8" or 6'1". So I think you're just seeing more athletic offensive linemen. I think you're seeing a different kind of offensive lineman to combat these defensive linemen that are 320 pounds that can run 4.840s. I mean, it's freakish. So to have those guys that can move as well, you're seeing a lot of lateral runs be part of the game. Outside zone, zone read, stuff like that, because it's becoming tough duty unless you bring these bigger guys in to move people north and south. So that's going to be huge to get athletic guys that can move on stretches and outside zones. So I think we are seeing a different type of offensive lineman, but where they play, where they fit in, is to be determined.
Well, we had a dozen. We are now up to 14 who have signed today with the University of Pittsburgh as you're watching the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent special right here at PittsburghPanthers.com. As we mentioned, Alex Officer is one of the latest to join. Let's take a look at the list. We start with, here's Tony Harper. Here's Jess DeWia, Reggie Green, Alex Officer. Now Carson Baker is added to the list, and Jared Jones-Smith. Let's start with Baker. Guess what? He's an offensive lineman. We've seen a few of those already. He's 6'5", 280, out of Fairborn, Ohio, which is around the Dayton area. But here's another kid who comes in, highly thought of, another big frame that can come in and add to the depth.
Yeah, I don't think he can get enough of them. Offensive lineman, I love it. As a quarterback, Trey's got to be happy. He's got these offensive linemen are piling in, and they're going to be in front of him. So at some point, and as a quarterback on the roster, you're excited to have an influx of youth at that position. They need more depth there. They need athleticism there. Carson Baker provides that. There he is on a trap block inside, just pancaking a guy and getting a second block. Relentless, a good football player. Comes from a good program. You can't get enough of those guys, in my opinion. And in the trenches is where you want to really have your beef.
We're going to take a break from the offensive lineman, take a look at Jarrett Jones-Smith when we come back from break. But I believe City League is in the house. Tyreek Jarrett is going to join us. He is already enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh. He's going to tell us about why he chose Pitt and what it means for him to play right here at home. I believe he thinks of himself as a bit of a mama's boy. We'll find out if that's true right here at Pitt Live Wire Special. It's National Letter of Intent Day. Welcome to the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day special. Welcome back, Jeff Hathorn with Pat Bostic. And we are joined by Alderdice's own Tyreek Jarrett by way of the Milford Academy. Congratulations on choosing the University of Pittsburgh. You're already enrolled in classes. What has this first few weeks of starting your college career been like, at least academically, since you won't start on the field for another month?
It's been good. I've been catching a feel of everything, trying to get to know everybody, trying to get to know my teachers, introducing myself, getting a feel of the big classroom and everything. It's been pretty good.
How's the adjustment been getting in the weight room? I know you spent a year at Milford, which is kind of a college type of atmosphere, but what's it been like to really dive in the weight room here?
It's been a big step. Just learning new things. Everything is different, just the technique and everything. I'm getting used to that. It's just different.
What does it mean for you to be home?
It means everything, because I don't got to leave my mom. So, just her coming to every game, the support and everything, it means everything to me.
Now, what did that year – sorry, Jeff. What did that year at Milford do for you? You played at Alderdice, had a very successful career, were slated to be a part of last year's recruiting class, went to Milford. How do you feel? Did you utilize that to really prepare you for this year? Do you feel more ready this year to come to Pitt and make an impact than you did last year this time?
Definitely. It's steps to all of it. It's definitely steps, because high school is a little bit slower, Milford a little bit faster, college I know is a lot faster. So it's just steps to everything. And definitely coming from Milford made me more humble, coming from nothing, so I'm definitely happy to be here.
We have an opportunity to look at some of your game tape and get for you a chance to look at it. You're 6'3", 320. Obviously, you have an opportunity here, but I don't know if you get to see yourself ISO'd very often. But talk about your mentality when you're playing the game, just how you approach every play, every opportunity.
to just do it. You know, I don't really think too much. Just do it. I just go play by play. I read my opponent, and I just do it.
Now you're very athletic for a guy your size. Is that something you take pride in? The quickness off the ball, your moves, the repertoire of moves you have. Is that something you really want to impart about yourself? Is that you're more athletic than people probably give you credit for?
Definitely. I feel as in people sleep me. They definitely don't think that I would be as athletic as I am. So I surprise them. So when I come at them, so.
Where's the good footwork come from?
It's just natural. Just natural. Coming from older dice, you know, we do a lot of ladders and everything. So I always had pretty quick feet. So it was nothing new.
So on the dance floor, you can move.
Pretty good.
You mentioned your mom earlier. How special is that relationship, and what kind of football mom is she?
She supports me with anything I do, anything and everything. She's there everything that I do. She's there. She supports me. She's at every game. She doesn't miss not one, even if she has work.
Now, can you excuse me just a second? Can you hear her voice, or does she have? Is there a whistle or something where you know that there's something she wants you to know?
She's always loud enough in the crowd. I always can hear her over everyone.
I know the feeling.
Might be a little harder at Heinz Field, but get her cowbell or something. You know?
I think so. I think I can hear her still. She's always loud.
Now coming to Pitt now and living on your own, and you're used to that, going to Milford and going to classes, and a guy who's kind of taking a little bit of a leadership role, as we think, and he told us, is a guy who's always in the room for you guys when you're doing interviews. Shakir Soto's in the corner again, looking over things. What's it been like with him? I know he's an energetic guy.
Definitely. A lot of energy. He has a good personality. I think of him as a brother. You know, I took him as in family. And, you know, I look at him as a brother. He's a good person.
Do you four who have come in earlier, along with Trey and Scott, are you guys tight?
Yeah, definitely. Just coming in early, it's just we formed a bond, and it's pretty tight already. We know we're teammates. We're going to be teammates for a long time.
To represent the City League, what does that mean to you?
I want to show everybody that you can do it, coming from anywhere, because the City League, we don't get a lot of looks. A lot of people don't look at us. So it's definitely a blessing. So I'm showing everybody that we can do it, regardless of where you're from, regardless of where you're at. You can do it. You can make it.
There's been a lot of good City League players when you look down the list on the roster now.
I think there's a Hall of Famer from Alderdice who may have gone to University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and then you've got on the roster right now with Ed Tinker, Manessa Gardner. You look back in time with guys like Kevin Barlow and Rod Rutherford. The list goes on and on. Is that something? Is that a special group to be a part of City League? Special relationship with those guys saying, we played in the City League and we're still relevant.
Definitely. I don't feel ashamed coming from the City League. It's actually more empowering me, making me feel more that I had to do this. You know, I had to show everybody that I had to make it. I had to do it.
It seems like you're the type of guy who embraces being a role model for kids to look up to you and what you might be able to do at the university. Is that fair?
Definitely. I know my goals, and I know where I came from, and I know how hard it was for me to make it. And I know a lot of kids go through what I went through. So I know that you can look at me, I'm a living example, that you can definitely make it.
Beyond being close to mom, why was Pitt the right choice for you?
Always been here. I grew up watching Pitt. You know, it's just the history. You know, great talent came out of Pitt, came into Pitt, you know, so I always wanted to go to Pitt. So it was nothing new.
You talk about your goals, and I'm not going to ask you to predict the future, but going to Milford and coming in now and being here early, you got spring ball. You know, is it fair to say that you are intent on being on that field come September and being a part of that rotation?
Tell you the truth, I really don't know yet, but I definitely want to play. It's always a goal to play. I want to play, so I wouldn't be able to tell you that. So
you're going with an open mind then. You're just going to go in there and work hard and see what happens.
Play as hard as I can.
I mentioned this to Shakir earlier, but how much do you watch what Aaron Donald does, and what are your impressions of him as a football player?
Oh, he's a great player. Definitely a great player, great personality. He's definitely just a cool person to just talk to and learn from.
When you watch him, what do you see about him that you want to be like?
Oh, he's just a monster every time he fires off the ball. Every time he gets off the ball, he gives 110% every time, and that's something that you got to work at, and you definitely have to be a great player to do.
Well, Tyreek, we appreciate your time and joining us. Congratulations on starting your career early here at the University of Pittsburgh. We'll see you at the spring game.
Thank you.
Tyreek Jarrett from Alderdice, as it's Pitt Live Wire special. A reminder, Our hashtag is PittLiveWire. If you have any questions for us on Twitter, we're going to come back. We're going to update the current list of letters of intent here at the University of Pittsburgh. You're watching Livewire Special here on PittsburghPanthers.com. It's Pitt Livewire National Letter of Intent Day special here on PittsburghPanthers.com. Jeff Hathorn and Pat Bostic. Let's take a look at the list of young men who have signed to play at the University of Pittsburgh. Aaron Reese was in first over the fax machine. Yes, they do use the fax machine still just for this purpose. Zach Challingsworth, Luke McLean, Chris Blewett, James Conner, Dorian Johnson, Devin Edwards, Zach Poker, and Ryan Winslow, along with some of the newer guys, Tony Harper, Jester Wea, Reggie Green, Alex Officer, Carson Baker, and Jared Jones-Smith. And Jared is the one man we haven't spoken about yet. We have talked about guys with size, maybe none as big as Jared.
Yeah, he's a big boy, 6'7", 300 pounds, goes by the nickname Hamburger. Found that one out. That's a good one, huh? Hamburger?
Maybe it should be cheesesteak since he's from West Philly.
Well, I like Hamburger. But big guy, big body. Saw him play basketball, watched a little bit of film. YouTube, these guys, you can find almost anything. Playing hoops, big guy, very athletic. Another guy with a big frame that's going to fortify that offensive line group. And you can't say enough about it. It's important. This is a need for this team. Left tackle position, good pass set, good punch. Just involved in a lot of different spots. At 6'7", as we spoke of a little bit earlier, I don't think he's limited to tackle, but probably the most ideal fit, probably where he'll end up. But a guy that really the sky's the limit as far as potential is concerned.
13 have signed so far. And one of the things that when I look at the recruiting, and while this can't be an exact science, I like to look at some of the other schools that are recruiting it. Michigan, Arizona, Oklahoma, Wisconsin all went hard after Jared Jones-Smith, which does tell you about what some of the other programs and how valuable they think this kid can be.
Yeah, the best of evaluators of talent are at these schools. And certainly when you see schools like that pursuing somebody, they're well thought of. And, a big body like that, and coaches drool over that. When you see a guy who's 6'7", 300 pounds, is physical, and can move. That's a lethal combination and has the ability to add more weight. So I'm not surprised at all after watching his film that he's a guy that really garnered some attention. But I think he hasn't played his best football yet. So it'll be intriguing to see what teams are after him after 4 or 5 years.
The hashtag on Twitter is PittLiveWire. So if you have questions for us, let us know at the bottom of the hour. You are going to be joined by Don Rebel from MSA and also Kevin Gorman, who follows the Pitt Panthers with the Tribune Review, as you guys take it until 11:30 on National Letter of Intent Day. Reminder as well, 3 o'clock, the Paul Chris News Conference, as he'll be able to go down the list, tell you more about some of these kids that we're telling you about and what he's looking for from some of these young men. There are guys in different area codes. A reminder again, it has to be 7 o'clock your time before you can sign and fax in that letter of intent. So there'll be a few that we'll be waiting for. Past the time we're on the air. But make sure you check out the Pitt Livewire blog for all the latest news, not just with Pitt football, but also with basketball. We have a women's game tonight as well, 7 o'clock as the Panthers take on Providence. It's a busy day for the crew, and they do a fantastic job here with
absolutely.
Livewire.
We'd be remiss not to talk about that crew with Paul Bartow heading that operation, Mendy Nestor, all the help they've got with the Livewire extra show with Marcus and Julius and you guys, what you've done with Hoops, and really just has been an awesome addition to the Pitt operation. I think it's been fabulous. The blog is up to date. It's the best information you can get. Visit that for all the updates, as you said. So not enough can be said about their work.
And the young men and women that work in the crew, you don't know the hours that they put in and the time that they spend setting up and just putting up with us.
Yeah,
that could be a job in itself.
It is a job
amongst all the other stuff they have to do.
I feel bad for everyone who comes in contact with me. So
to all of you guys for everything you do to really help everybody out there know more about Pitt Panthers athletics.
Absolutely.
As we look to expectations for next year, when some of these new kids are coming in, as Pitt goes over to the ACC, coming off 6-7 season following the bowl loss to an Ole Miss team that's we're finding out is pretty darn good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you know going into a new conference? You know, you're going to have a new quarterback. You're missing Ray Graham, one of your best tailbacks of all time. Mike Shanahan's gone. There are a couple of key defensive players in the secondary. Andrew Taglianetti was a key on special teams. What do you expect out of this football team?
I expect a lot. There's a lot of guys returning. A lot of guys returning on both sides of the ball. There's some key positions that are no question going to have to be replaced, losing really the quarterback of both sides of the team. Offensively, Tino Sinceri departing after his 5th year, and obviously Jared Holley on defense, really operating that group, keeping them in check. So new guys are going to have to step up. And I think leadership is as important this year as it ever has been, because you look back at last year, leadership, fosters the mentality to never panic, to make plays in key situations when the going gets tough. Games like Notre Dame, games like UConn, where the chips are stacked against you, but you got to make a play. They played great in the Notre Dame game, but at crunch time, late third, fourth, into the fourth quarter, when there was a first down that needed to be had, a throw that needed to be made, a catch that needed to be made, a tackle, an interception, they didn't get it done. That is what you look at all this offseason. Every time they're doing a rep on the bench or they're doing a squat or a sprint, they better be thinking about those 3-4 plays that got away from that Notre Dame game or the first half against UConn, and what they're going to do to correct that and make sure that does not happen this year. If that happens, if they're able to do that and impart that on this football team, I think this team has a chance to really compete for a championship in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Now, I realize I'm asking a quarterback this, but does the leader have to be the quarterback position? And if so, how do you go about, if you're the new guy and you're trying to win a job, how do you gain the respect and build that leadership? When is that done?
Action. It's what you do every single day. You're a representative of yourself and your school every time you step on the field, every time you step in the weight room, everywhere you go. I think every starter on this team should be a leader. It doesn't have to be one guy, 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys. There's going to be captains. There's going to be the quarterback. There's going to be a safety. There's going to be a middle linebacker. Okay. They don't have to be vocal. They don't have to be it could be a nonverbal leader. They could be an action guy, Aaron Donald. But I think all 22 guys that are starting and guys that go on special teams all should lead by example. The guys that are more vocal, they'll come forward. But everyone should be a leader by example. That's a mindset.
We've broken down every position but quarterbacks, so let's go there. It's a dynamic situation with different guys with different skill sets. We talked to Trayvon Chapman. He's a guy who can use his feet. Tom Savage is more of a pocket passer. Trey Anderson can move around in the pocket. And Chad Wojtek is probably more of a drop-back passer, but you've seen him more in practice than anyone has. Can you kind of scout what the Panthers have at quarterback for next year and what their options are?
I think they have a lot of options, which is a good thing. I think you've got definitely a front runner, in my opinion, is going to be Tom Savage, a guy who's a 5th-year guy. He's transferred. He's been through the ringer. The sense of urgency is high for Tom Savage. He's got 1 year. Similar situation to Russell Wilson. 1 year to digest. He's had an off year where he had a redshirt due to transfer guidelines. But he's got this year to really showcase his ability and to soak everything up that Paul Chryst has to teach, which is a lot. I think he is the lead horse in this race. You look at Chad Wojtek, a guy highly recruited, highly touted, coming out of Cleveland, Tennessee. Had to make an adjustment last year. Redshirted, learning a pro-style offense, more of an athletic guy. But I think he has turned into and is starting to transform himself into, as you said, a pocket passer with the ability to run and extend plays. I think you look down at Trayvon Chapman, Trey Anderson, guys that also operated spread offense. I think Trey Chapman is no doubt the most athletic of all of them. I think Trey Anderson brings experience. Everyone brings something to this table. It's going to be the guy that performs. The best man, may the best man win. And that, you want the best player on the field at the end of the day, and I know that's who Paul Chryst will choose.
We have a question to the hashtag of Pitt Livewire, and it's about the impact that you believe, Pat, that Jester Weah can make with this team.
You know, I think he's definitely got a chance to be an impact player. I don't know if it's this year. I think he's a guy that's going to have to develop, having not been perhaps a very polished football player yet, a guy who's just started playing the game. So I think his impact will probably be offset a little bit after a couple years, but I think he can turn into a player because certainly I think the staff saw something in his raw athletic tool set.
A reminder to get those questions in the hashtag Pitt Livewire. There are two more who have signed with the University of Pittsburgh. Both are Pennsylvanians, one from the Whipple, Jamar Parrish, who projects to be probably a fullback, along with Justin Moody, defensive lineman out of the Philadelphia area. Let's start with Parrish. We mentioned earlier the young man out of Erie McDowell in Connor and what he might be able to bring to a fullback position. What about Jamar Parrish? What impresses you about the 6'2", 230-pounder?
Size and athletic. He's thick legs, but he did a lot. He played a lot in the slot and ran seam routes and slants and crossing routes and stuff, things of that nature. So he was a very integral part of that Gateway offense. In the receiving category, I thought he was impressive catching the football. That gives you a dimension. If you're running powers, if you're running isolation plays with the fullback, to sneak him out in the flat, get him on some wheel routes, that's an advantage that is really going to give defenses fits. So I think he's going to be a guy who might have a chance. I think his fullback position is interesting when you look at it. It's a key part of a pro-style offense. I think David Durham, the transfer from Ohio State, probably is a front runner for that position coming back. He's a bull, impressive guy. Mark Jubilato, the returning starter from last year, factors into the mix. He's a guy, though, that never played fullback before. So really that was his first run, his first go-around playing fullback. And then you have Jamar Parrish, who I think can add something to that spot, certainly athletically.
Really an opportunity for some of these young men to come in, and for Jamar Parrish, the handoff of the Gateway tradition from Shane Hale and Cam Sadler to Jamar Parrish is once again that proud program brings another recruit to the University of Pittsburgh. Justin Moody is another one of the later verbal commitments and now officially a commit. We had 16, I believe, unofficially on our list out of Philadelphia is Justin Moody. Another guy with size, a guy who can play on the D-line. 65 tackles. He had 20.5 tackles for loss, 12.5 sacks last year.
Yeah, motor. He's got a motor. Reminds me a little bit of Chaz Alexi in that regard. Athletic guy, played some tight end in high school, attacks the football. I really like what he brings to the table. When you look at him and Luke McLean, I think you got two guys that have the ability to play end or tackle. I think Moody's a bigger guy with 264, so could possibly move inside and has an athleticism to him. Reminds me a little bit looking at Darrell Render's film last year. Similar type of build, strong, very, very physical players. I like him a lot.
Yeah, and you mentioned Darrell Render. I mean, there are some young guys. We saw that evolution of some of the ends. Devin Cook, guys that started to play better. I know T.J. Clemmings may be moving over to the other side of the football, but there are some young guys that are really building at that defensive line position. We've mentioned, and rightfully so, Aaron Donald, but there is some depth building around him.
Yeah, look at Darrell Render. You look at K.K. Mosley-Smith, Ty Ezell on the ends, Brian Murphy. You look at Devin Cook. There is a very good group of young guys that are going to have to step up this year. They're going to have to become players in order for this defensive line to improve upon its performance last year. Aaron Donald was special, there's no question, but the production from the end position in particular was not up to standard, and they have to get more help around that, interior, getting guys to move outside to become impact players and rush the passer and stop the run.
Well, Pat, it's been a pleasure. Don Rebel and Kevin Gorman from the Tribune Review are going to join us next as we take you through 11:30 with our special Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day right here on PittsburghPanthers.com.
And welcome back to Pitt Live Wire's National Letter of Intent Day special. Pat Bostic taking the wheel from Jeff Hathorn. And I'm joined by two local recruiting gurus, Mr. Don Rebel from the MSA Sports Network and Mr. Kevin Gorman from the Pittsburgh Tribune and Review. And we do have a new recruit, a new signee to report, Matt Columbos, a linebacker from Collingdale, PA, the Haverford School, 6'2", 215-pound, good player, committed to the University of Pittsburgh, signed his letter of intent, faxed it in. As is customary, you have to fax it in. He is in the books, but we're going to shift our focus here on the National Letter of Intent Day special to the Whippeal. You guys are very familiar. Pitt is a huge factor, obviously, in the Whippeal, and it's huge for the Panthers to get Whippeal product. Has always been a part of it. As we look at this list, the first one to come in, and we go in alphabetical order, Zach Challingsworth, a receiver out of South Fayette High School, played for Coach Joe Rossi there, very good player. What are your thoughts on Challingsworth and his impact he might have here at Pitt?
Well, he can shoot the three. I saw him last night. I did the South Fayette Montour basketball game, and he's quite an athlete. Ended up, I think, with 16 points. South Fayette lost to Montour. But big kid, athletic kid, and it was a big part of the success Joe Rossi turned around that South Fayette program, and is a good get for the Panthers. An early get, and he stayed committed the entire time.
Well, the thing that I like about Zach Challingsworth is not only does he have great size at, what's he, about 6'3", 200 pounds, but this is a guy who only turned 17 in October. So he's the kind of guy who not only will be welcome to a red shirt, but may actually like to do that. It might be his preference is to be a red shirt and give him another year to kind of grow and become more physical and adapt to that college lifestyle. So this is a guy who has some potential beyond because he's so young. But the thing I liked about him most was his versatility. This is a guy who's not only has the ability to stretch the field, but also go across the middle, kind of a la Mike Shanahan in some ways. Not quite as tall, but a big receiver. But he also was a kick returner and punt returner. He also played defensive back and had a lot of interceptions. And he was a four-year letterman for South Fayette and a guy who was a key player on their 2010 WPIAL Class AA champions and state finalists. So this is a guy who made an early impact despite being a young player in his class. And so I think that he's got a lot of upside when it comes to playing that position.
And I think something Kevin touched on too is special teams. I think that's where he's going to make his mark early on in his collegiate career, not only on the return aspect of punts and kicks, but also blocking punts, on the attack side of kickoffs too. So very good special teams player.
Yeah, very versatile player.
I was going to say, I think I read that he had a bunch of block kicks that, over his course of his career, something like 7 blocked field goals and point after attempts.
Yeah, very versatile player. Take a look at some film clips from Zach Challingsworth. Very good player. I think Joe Rossi's system really kind of exemplified his talents as he moved to different spots, was able to play inside in the slot, so you're running slants, crossing routes. He's run after the catch. I think he's faster than people probably give him credit for as you look at him separate right there. And you talk about his versatility on special teams, his speed and size, definitely going to help that, Don.
Yeah, deceptive speed. That's a good call, Pat. He can break away as we're seeing here and break away big time from the defenders after he makes the catch. And again, I think he's big enough that, catches over the middle, he's not going to shy away from. He can get the dirty yards, so to speak.
Yeah, another thing I like about Zach is that he's a good athlete. Not just when you see the receiving, he has good ball skills. He has good speed, good size. And this is a guy who, like you mentioned, Don, has played football and basketball. Their basketball team has been highly successful, played in the state championship game. This is a guy who is a competitor, and he's a winner. And I think anytime a program can bring kids like that, not only local recruits from the WPIL, but also guys who have experienced winning and bring that winning mindset to a program, that's always a bonus.
Absolutely, and just watching the film, I think I think it was a good point, Kevin, talking about Mike Shanahan. It's something we mentioned earlier. Not quite the size of Mike Shanahan, but certainly the type of dependability and a guy who's fearless across the middle of the field.
Yeah, and Shanahan played both football and basketball. Was a Division I recruit in both sports. Like I said, he's bigger than Zach, but Zach might still be growing, and I think that the key is you have a guy who's willing to play inside in the slot, who has a little bit of deceptive speed. I don't know if he'll be an outside receiver, but I think he has that type of ability. And I think the key is when you're losing guys like Mike Shanahan, you need to bring in players who have at least similar ability, and I think you have some of that in Zach Challingsworth.
We're going to take a scoot up north to Erie. We're going to go up to Erie High School, and we're going to talk about James Conner, a running back, a guy coming in, slated as a running back, but seems to also a very good defensive end, seems to have some versatility as well. He's slated, like I said, to come in as a running back, but where do you see his biggest impact on?
Let me help you out here, Don, because I've seen James Conner play in camps, and this is a guy who was recruited as a defensive end primarily because last year he spent the season being the number 2 back option behind Greg Garman, who signed with Iowa. So Conner had this defensive end ability, but they moved him to running back this year where he was the primary option. And this is a guy who is 6'2", 230 pounds, combines power and speed. And he really carried McDowell this season, just was a physical presence. And what I like is you see him, he can go in motion and take the toss. He can run between the tackles. I think, this is a Pitt recruiting class that really didn't land, what some people would consider a big-time tailback. A couple of the guys that they were shooting for signed elsewhere. But when you get a guy like James Conner, who not only fills that need in terms of what Paul Chryst wants to do on offensively, run between the tackles, get the tough yards, have that physical back who can move the chains. But you have a guy who also, if things don't work out at running back, can play defensive end, potentially be maybe an outside linebacker. I love his versatility. I love his motor. I saw this kid in a camp at Gateway High School last spring, and he just went after everybody. I saw him doing defensive line drills and just attacking everybody and beating every offensive lineman he went up against. I think this was a great get for Pitt. I think he was a real steal in some sense in that he had a great season as a running back after he'd committed and looked like a DN prospect. He looks like an even better prospect at running back.
Yeah, I wasn't sure as far as the projection is concerned. I did see him as a junior last fall of 2011, and the motor, you touched on the motor. I think that's a good call because he was all over the place. I really hadn't heard a whole lot about him going into the game. There were other more high-profile players from Erie McDowell going into that game against Seneca Valley, but he was all over the place defensively, and when their top running back got hurt, he carried the load offensively too.
Yeah, certainly some definite position flexibility there. A guy who loves football. Seems to be kind of a common thread through this recruiting class. Is guys that do have a little bit of flexibility, but just love the game or attack, physical kind of players. James Conner seems to fit that. But we're going to move to the City League now. A guy we just had on set and talked to, Tyreek Jarrett, big defensive tackle out of Taylor Alderdice, who had to take a trip to Milford up in New York for a year, spent a year up there in Milford, but is back now on campus early, a big defensive tackle.
Yeah, we just met Tyreek in person. I've seen him play. He's a guy who's just he clogs the defensive line when he's out there. You just see how wide of a body he is, but he's also athletic. He's a guy who he has that ability to move. I think he was timed as a high school player for running a 4.9 40. So this is a guy who can get up and go. His weight is in his upper body more so than his lower body. And I think when you saw him play in high school, he also played guard. So, he's a guy who has some positional flexibility, although I think he is projected as a defensive lineman. But Tyreek Jarrett is a run stuffer. He's a guy who can get some push on the defensive line and not only close the gap for other guys to make plays, but I think he's also the kind of guy who can be a playmaker on his own. And there's he has some ties to some of those Clairton guys as well. That he has family in Clairton, so I think that could be. You added another about that guy to the Pitt roster.
Yeah, a guy we just had on set, a guy who's a self-proclaimed mama's boy, so he's happy to be home and excited about the opportunity to play for the Pitt Panthers. Again, now a big recruit that we've all heard about and talked about is Dorian Johnson, the big offensive tackle from Bell Vernon High School. And watching him on film, just impressive. A guy I think could have an immediate impact, but certainly has garnered a lot of attention.
Highly recruited, no question about it. Originally was going to go to Penn State, changed his mind when they had their issues, and that's a great catch for the University of Pittsburgh. Good feet, powerful young man, well-spoken young man. Here you see on some of the highlights, whether it's on the offensive side of the ball, as we are seeing here, opening up big holes. He was a huge reason for the Bell Vernon success, really not just this past year, but really going back to his sophomore season when the Leopards came back and were a fixture as far as the WPL AAA playoffs are concerned. Also, a pretty good defensive player, long arms, strong kid. Played on both sides of the ball, but I guess he's going to be earmarked for the offensive side of the ball here at the University of Pittsburgh. But well-spoken young man as well. Pretty smart kid.
Yeah, I got to see Dorian play against Central Valley in WPL playoffs, and I was incredibly impressed with not only his ability to just dominate the guys in front of him, but also to do it on both sides of the ball. He was fantastic defensively in that game. And what I saw, when you meet him in person, you see a guy who's every bit of 6'5", 290 pounds with very little body fat. Also a good athlete, huge hands, long arms. I mean, this is a guy who has a lot of potential for growth. I could see him being a 330, 340-pound guy someday and not looking like he's carrying that type of weight. I think he's got a lot of upside. A lot of times when you see a guy get the type of recruiting, with the recruiting analyst had him rated the number 2 tackle in the country before anybody really knew about Dorian Johnson. He had all these scholarships that these major colleges after him, and people will tend to pick those type of guys apart. And I heard that early. Well, you hear, let's see what kind of desire he has. Let's see whether he can dominate guys his own size. As the season progressed, Dorian Johnson got better and better, and every coach that I talked to about him said, this kid is the most dominant lineman we've seen in some time in the WPIL. And he went down to the Under Armour All-America game in Orlando and proved it. And that's where the number 2 national ranking comes from now, is not so much with the type of offers that he got in the spring and summertime. It's what he did on the national stage in a national all-star game, that he was dominant in the week of practice and during the game. And this is not only a great recruit for Pitt to get from the WPIL, because he's one of the top 4 players in the WPIL and probably one of the top 5 to 10 players in the state. But it's also at a need position. The Panthers need tackles. He could play left or right tackle. I think he projects as a left tackle, but he can certainly be a run, guy who drives as a run blocker on the right side if necessary. And I think he's the kind of guy. I don't know that he's going to need a redshirt year, but if you give him a redshirt year, I think has a potential to be a 4-year starter one way or the other.
Absolutely, and you talk about a highly touted guy at a position of need, and that's the focus for Paul Christ has been look at the offensive line. I think today we've got 5 signees for the offensive line. Another area of interest is tight end. Another position to fill in behind J.P. Holtz, the impact he had to have as a freshman, and he did a phenomenal job filling in for Hubie Graham, who was hurt the majority of last season. But tight end, a position they want to solidify and get depth at. 3 has signed their letters of intent already. 1 is already on campus. We spoke to Scott Orndoff earlier, and Orndoff's a good player. A kid out of Seton LaSalle High School. Watched his film. Big kid. Saw him in person. Big kid. Looks like he might have a chance in spring ball to show himself.
Yeah, and Orndoff's a guy who came to Seton LaSalle as a quarterback, the son of a coach, and quickly kind of outgrew that position. And Seton LaSalle found ways to use him. He played wide receiver as a junior. He was, even though he was listed as a tight end, he lined up wide the majority of the time. He's moved inside to tight end this season, and really showed some signs of improving as a run blocker. I saw him play several times. This is a guy, if he can catch the ball in the open field, he has breakaway speed. He has that kind of sub 4.7 speed for a guy who's 6'5", 250. Very impressive in the open field. I think he can really thrive in this type of offense, especially as more of the receiving threat. I think he's not your traditional tight end in the blocking sense, but as a receiver, he's not only a big target, but one who can get you a lot of yards after the catch.
Coach's kid, I think, came from Waynesburg, right?
He's from Waynesburg.
To Seton LaSalle, and the one thing that stands out about him, the ever-changing position of tight end. We see it in the pro level, and we've seen it filter down into the collegiate and the high school level as well. And I think Kevin makes a good point, is that he's one of those flexible tight ends. Yeah, he's got to improve in his blocking per se, but reminds me a little bit. I'm not going to say off the field, but on the field of what we saw in Rob Gronkowski when he was at Woodland Hills, and then went out west to play his college ball. And good hands, good speed, and you see some of the highlights here, able to break tackles and works the middle of the field very, very well. Coach's son, so also that tells you that he knows the game. Very smart young man, and a good get for the Panthers.
One thing you're seeing in the highlights, Pat, is that this is a guy who, when he catches the ball, he's got big, strong legs. He's hard to bring down. You're not going to be able to hit him in the thighs and think you're going to knock him down. He bounces off of tackles, and he's pretty nimble too. He's got good footwork. So, like I said, he's very dangerous. He doesn't have great hands. He has good hands. But I think that's something he can work on, get him on the jugs machine and have him spend a little more time doing that. You know what that's all about, Pat?
Oh, yeah.
But I think this is a guy who has a lot of upside. I think he was a real steal. And, he had committed to Paul Christ and Joe Rudolph when they were at Wisconsin and ended up changing to Pitt when they came here. And he was one of the very first recruits in this class, and I think he's one of the more important ones.
Interestingly, you look at the tight ends that have come here and have gone on to success in a pro career, guys that played different positions in high school. Nate Byon was a receiver coming out of Franklin, so a big receiver coming in and has an impact his freshman year. I'll never forget the touchdown catch he had against West Virginia in the end zone in 2006. J.P. Holtz was a running back last year. So guys that come in from multiple spots to play tight end, and that's, I think, why we're referencing the word versatility so much, is because they've played other spots. Another guy who just happens to be versatile is Jamar Parrish, the fullback, a projected fullback, but really a hybrid-type player at Gateway for Terry Smith, a guy who's really impressive, caught the ball extremely well, but really am interested to see how he can impact the fullback position, another position in need for Pitt.
Well, yeah. Again, that's a position much like we were talking about with tight end. It's always changing. It's not just you put your little fire hydrant back there and he's basically a blocker in the backfield anymore. And I think that's what Pitt sees in Jamar Parrish. Played tight end at Gateway High School. Has good hands, and I think that's something that will come into play a lot. You see teams like to use that fullback out of the backfield as a receiver, and here you see him coming down the middle with some good speed, splitting the defense. His good hands. Another player who made an early commitment to the University of Pittsburgh, and Terry Smith, former receiver, that can only help. That was his head coach at Gateway, and I'm sure Jamar picked up a lot of tricks, so to speak. But yeah, he's going to be a fullback. So the blocking aspect is something obviously that Coach Christ and his staff saw and liked in Jamar's game.
Yeah, and Jamar's a guy who was one of the Gateway's leading receivers as a junior, had to share kind of the ball because they had so much talent at the skill positions this past season and didn't get quite as many catches. But I think he's a guy who could lie up at fullback. He can be an H-back. He can be a tight end if you want to throw an extra tight end there and go into 3 tight end set. He could line up in that position. He's also a guy that was one of the best defensive players for Gateway, especially at linebacker. Terry Smith called him his best linebacker, his defensive leader, and I think that the leadership role is something you can't underestimate. This is another guy who comes from a winning program, has experience winning, brings that attitude to Pitt, and I think he's the kind of guy who can make an impact on special teams as well early in his career, and he's coming in at good size. I mean, this is a physical specimen. This is a guy who's not, you don't have to worry about putting weight on him. He's already 6'2", 230. Big, thick legs, strong upper body. So I think there's a good signing in Jamar Parrish. I thought he was one of the guys that they targeted very early, and he committed relatively early to the Panthers as well.
Yeah, and you talk about it's interesting that the aspect of having another tight end in there, and it kind of brings to mind a guy who can kind of step in an inline position, a double tight end set, come off the ball, and also give you that fullback mentality because he is such a good wide receiver. Certainly will be interesting to follow that. We've kind of gone over the commits from and the signees from Western Pennsylvania, rehashed that. Zach Challingsworth, the wide receiver from South Fayette High School. We moved on then to Tyreek Jarrett, with James Conner out of Erie McDowell. You go down the line to Dorian Johnson, big offensive lineman from Bell Vernon High School. Scott Orndoff, tight end from Seton LaSalle High School. Jamar Parrish, fullback from Gateway. And on down the line with the rest of those guys. And we look at the commits to date. We look at the signees to date, the whole list. I believe we've got 16 in so far, 17 with the addition that we just read earlier. We will take a break here on the Pitt Livewire National Signing Day special and be right back. And welcome back to the Pitt Livewire National Letter of Intent Day special. We've got a new signee to report, Rashid Ibrahim, a defensive back, 6'2", 170 pounds out of Gaithersburg, Maryland. Very versatile player, big kid, big frame, projected to play a safety or corner position, but an excellent running back. Watching his film, again out of the Avalon School in Rockville, Maryland, 6'1", 185, defensive back, very athletic, good running back in high school. Reminds me a little bit of an Isaac Bennett type player. Has the type of flexibility you want, but can break through runs, is physical. He's the type of run stop and safety I could see being an impact player back at the safety spot. Really featured in his highlight film on offense, but you watch him here at a linebacker spot and how physical he is. It will fit well on that back end for the Panthers. Coming up this season, going to make his impact felt when he comes here in June. To go back there with a really deep group of guys at that safety spot. When you look at it, guys like Jason Hendricks returning, a guy like Ray Vinipal coming back, but there's some guys also on the roster that could have an impact back there. Ryan Lewis was a guy you look last year with some of these guys from the Whippeal that move around. Bam Bradley, Deshaun Rippey. These guys that are on the roster now from Western Pennsylvania, some of these guys that maybe haven't seen the field as much, Devin Cook. Who are some of the guys that stand out to you, having watched high school football, as you looked back at their senior years and you think about Pitt's roster now? Who are some of the guys to you say, you know what, it's to take them a couple years, but they can be players?
Well, you mentioned one. Deshaun Rippey is a guy who he was a national recruit, an All-America type of guy. Had a lot of major colleges after him because of his size and speed. He's a guy who may really benefit from a redshirt year and even a year spent, being a backup. I think he's a guy who has a lot of talent. He was only about 195, 200 pounds. So for him to play safety or linebacker, he was a little undersized at that position. But he has a lot of athleticism, and that's what people like is the speed. And a lot of people say, well, he wasn't as productive in high school as maybe some of his teammates. Adontes Ford, who transferred from Syracuse, by the way. But I thought that they had some guys that Deshaun Rippey, he played wide receiver and linebacker. That's an odd combination. That tells you a little bit about his athleticism. I think he's a guy who really could benefit from a redshirt year.
And a guy who also redshirted last year who figures to have a huge impact coming up this year on the offensive line is Adam Bisnawati, a guy who really made his presence felt on scout team and throughout, fall camp and even into some of December when they had that layoff before the bowl game in practice. What do you see from him in high school? What do you think you were going to see from him this year?
Yeah, we talked about him last year at this time. What a great get that was for Pitt. The big man out of Fox Chapel High School, and we talked about how he probably would need a little bit of seasoning, but it's a position of need that we've talked about here today. Trying to fill the voids in offensive line. There's a pretty big void. You can't teach size. He has tremendous size, and he has a great motor, and so learning the position, learning some technique, practicing the footwork. All things that he was able to do this past year without the pressure of being thrown to the wolves, and so I don't think there's any question. We talked at great length about his qualities and how he can help this program last year, and now it's full steam ahead, I think.
The guy who did have an impact last year, who we talked a lot about last year on the show, Don, is Russell Shell, and a guy who really is going to be coming to a prominent role this season with Ray Graham departing. I want to pose a question to you, Kevin. You've seen a lot of running backs come out of the Whippeal into college football, an environment where there's a lot of 2-3 running backs, type of running back by committee. Is Russell Shell the type of guy that can break that mold and be a guy who demands 30 carries?
Well, he certainly has shown the propensity to carry the ball 30 or more times a game. I think he had close to 1,000 carries in high school alone. It was a 4-year starter, and the state's all-time leading rusher and one of the top 10 in the nation when he graduated. Set all kinds of WPIL and state records in terms of rushing. I think this year was great for him that he had to share the ball because he learned to do some things that he wasn't used to doing. One is having to pick up the pass blocking, having to make sure that he could pick up blitzes and do things like that. Another is to maybe develop into more of a receiver out of the backfield, not because he didn't have the capability. He has great hands, and I think he's got great body control, but he didn't have to catch the ball out of the backfield. They just handed it off to him at Hopewell High School. But I do think that he's the kind of guy who he gets better with more carries, a little bit like a la Jerome Bettis, that he's the kind of guy who gets stronger as the game goes on. He doesn't wear out. He doesn't wear down. He wears teams out. And if necessary, I think he can carry that load. And I think he knows that this is his season. It's his turn to kind of be the star player at Pitt on the offensive end. And what I think is nice is that Pitt has put some pieces around him. We mentioned Dorian Johnson and Adam Bisnawadi at tackle. We mentioned Scott Orndoff and J.P. Holtz at tight end. There's some receivers in Challingsworth and some other guys that could be coming in that he's not going to have to carry the full load. But in terms of having to run the ball, he certainly is capable and I think more than willing to carry the ball as many times as possible.
Well, I think he probably welcomed after being the man at Hopewell High School for 4 years. He probably welcomed, playing second fiddle for a year. There wasn't a whole lot of pressure with Ray Graham here. They had an experienced quarterback as well in Tino Sinceri. So, he sort of was able to adjust. It was a year of adjustment, and I don't think there's any question now you're going to have a new quarterback. He is going to be the man as far as the running backs are concerned. I think he will be more than happy to put whatever the offensive hopes are as far as the ground game is concerned on his shoulders. One thing, too, a lot of carries that Kevin alluded to, very healthy through at least through his freshman year as a college football player, too. So he's very durable. And I think he's going to be chomping at the bit to be the man this season.
Well, the one thing, too, Pat, about Russell Shell was that when he played high school ball, he didn't lift weights. And I always found that amazing to see a kid built like he was 5'10", 5'11", 205 pounds as a senior in high school without really ever spending any serious time in the weight room. And he might have toyed around with it a little bit and done some testing, but he never really spent any serious time in a weight program. And I think this fall and especially this springtime in summertime will really help him improve in that area. And you're going to see a guy who is physical, and a lot of his strength has been in his lower body. I think next year you're going to see a little more of it in his upper body. And we already saw in the Virginia Tech game a guy who was willing to lower his shoulder and run people over. He's got a great stiff arm. He's got that willingness to lower his shoulder, and he doesn't have great speed. He has good speed, but he has quickness and he has good feet in tight spaces. I mean, I think this kid, I think what happened with him sharing time with Ray Graham will benefit Russell Shell a lot in the long run. And I think, if he's as dedicated as he says he is, I think, he has a lot of room to really have a breakthrough sophomore season this fall.
And Russell Shell, obviously one of the bigger recruits in recent memory, along with a guy like Dorian Johnson. The names go on as we go back through time of local recruits that it seems like every move they make is chronicled. And Kevin, you wrote a piece the other day in the paper about this recruiting process and what it's become, the attention these guys garner, rightfully so sometimes. They are big-name players from the local area, and people love their football around here, so certainly don't want to take away from that. But talk about Paul Christ and how he's come in to the scene here as far as recruiting. How has he been received, as you spoke about that process, how has he been received in that process, in the recruiting circles around town?
Well, you know what? There's a lot of guys. There's different types of recruiters, and there's some guys that are the dynamic salesmen, great pitches and everything. And what people have really kind of accepted about Paul Crispin, I think, has really made great inroads here in Western Pennsylvania. Is that I keep hearing the words that he's genuine, that he's a great guy, that he's honest. The coaches in the WPL, they not only like him as a coach, but also as a person that he's very well received. And a lot of it has to do with the way he's extended to the coaches to come down for camps, to come down for clinics. And those are all things that you have to do the WPL recruiting is going to be the lifeblood for a Western Pennsylvania program like the University of Pittsburgh. And they have to. You don't have to get every player from the WPL every year. Some people they win and they live and die with every win and loss on the recruiting trail. But when you look at the guys that Paul Christ has brought in, that he comes in and he's able to keep Russell Shell on board. Here's the state's #1 all-time leading rusher. He's able to grab J.P. Holtz, who I thought was the WPL Player of the Year in terms of being the most versatile football player in Western Pennsylvania a year ago. He's able to get Adam Bisnawadi, a guy who was an All-American at offensive tackle. And then this year, look at the guys that he's signed. He's gotten a lot of the top players, and even a couple who got away. They all had Pitt on their short list, and I think that's as much as you can ask for any head coach, is to say, keep us in mind, keep us in the mix, let us be one of your finalists, and when it all comes down to it, a lot of these kids are going to say yes more often than no, and then I think as the program progresses and Pitt wins more and more games, I think then it becomes a destination school.
Oh yeah, it's the one thing that we we sort of talked about a year ago as well, Pat, is I think it was Dave Wanstead said I needed to build a fence around the WPIAL, and he was able to do that. What Paul Chris has been able to do last year was sort of amazing because again it was a transition year. He had just taken over as coach at the University of Pittsburgh and was able to hold a lot of the top recruits from District 7. And has made inroads, and as Kevin said, I think there's that trust. He's been able to already build up a trust and talking to a lot of high school football coaches in the area that have had dealings with him. Maybe it's that Midwestern upbringing, but there is a lot of trust with what he's doing and what he's saying and accomplishing here at the University of Pittsburgh. But you want to make sure that you're getting the elite ball players, and when you see some of the players that we've just talked about from last year's class, and already with the likes of a Dorian Johnson and Zach Challingsworth from this year's class, you're seeing the elite players coming to the University of Pittsburgh, or as Kevin mentioned, a finalist. They're one of the final 2 or 3 teams that these studs are looking for. I mean, I think they're always going to have success here in southwestern Pennsylvania, but it's making sure those elite players don't slip through the cracks and slip elsewhere so easily.
Absolutely.
One thing, Pat, is a lot of times we look at, you mentioned the elite players. A lot of times we look at guys and say, well, who has the scholarship offers from major programs? Who has the stars next to their name? I was looking back at some past classes. Dorian Johnson is Pitt's second 5-star in the past decade. The other was Jonathan Baldwin, a first-round draft pick of the Kansas City Chiefs. But there's guys that have 2 and 3 stars, too, that sometimes have a world of potential. They have a ton of upside, and they can be guys who really make their mark at the college level. A guy who really springs to my mind is he was a huge recruit for Pitt at the time because he was at least the Tribs Player of the Year and had led Aliquippa to a state championship in a dramatic fashion with 5 touchdowns in the PIAA final. But Darrell Rivas is a guy who he really didn't have the major colleges after him. He really hadn't decided until very late that he wanted to play football over basketball. But you get guys like that who are at a position of need, guys who have unusual size and skill for that position, and really more than anything have that desire to be great. And those are guys that can be huge difference makers as well. So you don't have to just look at the recruiting in terms of the rankings, in terms of the star system. Look at them in terms of guys who have potential and have the desire to be great, because there's a lot of guys that come out of Western Pennsylvania that are hidden gems, and what really helps them make the great transition to college football is that they're football players. They love the game, and they have great desire, and they have NFL dreams in their sights. And they work hard at it, and they become better players. A great example, not that he was a star player in college, but a guy who was a contributor every year was Andrew Taglianetti. He was a guy who was ticketed for a gray shirt. They wanted to bring him in a semester after his class joined, and he ended up being a 4-year letterman for the Panthers. So he's a great example of a guy who's a good football player, had a lot of desire, and only got better and better as his career progressed.
We're getting some great insight here from Kevin Gorman from the Tribune Review and Don Rebel from the MSA Sports Network, talking about some of the elite players from Western Pennsylvania, how they've come in the impact. Some of the sleepers, as Kevin was just talking about, guys that creep up on you, guys that may not have the accolades. We've got much more to come here on National Letter of Intent Day Special. We've got more signees to come in. We're anticipating some more signees here in the next 30 to 45 minutes. We'll have them all right here on the Pitt Live Wire National Letter of Intent Day Special. And welcome back to the Pitt Livewire National Letter of Intent Day special right here on PittsburghPanthers.com. We've got live streaming coverage, 7:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Every time a fax comes through that fax machine with a signee on it, we're going to bring you updates. We've had 19 of them come through so far. Let's take a look at that list right now. Up on the screen there, Aaron Reese, offensive lineman from the eastern part of the state. Zach Challingsworth, a wide receiver from South Fayette. Luke McLean from Michigan. Chris Blewett, a kicker. James Conner from up in Erie, a running back. Dorian Johnson, the big offensive tackle from Bell Vernon. Devin Edwards, a tight end from the Columbus area of Ohio. Zach Poker from Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. A guy
that was impressive.
I'm trying. Slated to be a linebacker. Ryan Winslow, a punter from out east. Tony Harper, a tight end from Toledo. Jester Wea, a wide receiver from Madison, Wisconsin. Reggie Green, an athlete from New Jersey. Alex Officer, offensive tackle from up in New York. Carson Baker, another offensive lineman, a common thread here with this recruiting class for the Panthers. Carson Baker is from Ohio as well. Jared Jones-Smith, the guy that goes by the nickname Hamburger. Don, pretty good nickname, not bad.
I like it.
Big guy for an offensive lineman, that works. Justin Moody, defensive end from West Philadelphia. Jamar Parrish, fullback from Gateway. Matt Galambos, a linebacker. And the third page, we're starting the third page here. Rashid Ibrahim, a defensive back from Maryland. And all these guys are coming in. It's a change for this Pitt football program going to the Atlantic Coast Conference. It's new opponents, some freshness. We got to look at the home slate, the opponents, and the slate of opponents for this year. It's the best schedule. Kevin, you've covered Pitt football for a long time. It's the best schedule I've seen since I've been here, and going years back, it's excellent with home games against Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, and Virginia in conference, Notre Dame out of conference. Those are 5 big-name opponents, along with games against Villanova and New Mexico non-conference. Then going on the road to Duke. David Cutcliffe got that program going pretty well last year. They had a tough loss to Cincinnati in the Charlotte Bowl. Georgia Tech will be tough. Paul Johnson. Pitt's going to face 2 old-school option teams, Navy and Georgia Tech, in one season. I wonder if there's anyone else in the country that plays both of them. You look at Syracuse, another taking that rivalry from the Big East to the ACC. Tough loss up there last year. Going to have to go there again this year to get some revenge. And then going to Blacksburg. And we know Frank Beamer is going to be looking to exact some revenge after a tough loss here. It just seems like he can't win in Pittsburgh. But what I want to talk about with you guys and your recruiting analysis, Don Rebel from the MSA Sports Network and Kevin Gorman from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review, is the impact that a schedule like this, schedule, use that term loosely because dates haven't been set, a schedule like this, a conference like the ACC, the type of impact, if any, it has on recruiting.
Well, I think the one thing that it offers is stability, that kids know that they're in a major football conference that's both aligned with the BCS and has some major powers. That's one of the things that the draw of playing of Florida State, of playing at a Virginia Tech and doing it on an annual basis. So those are all major draws. The other thing is you're recruiting against ACC type of schools too. So you're recruiting the similar talent. And I think that, the kids are going to know that not only do they have a chance to play close to home, but also that the road trips aren't that far, so it's a twofold thing that this is a major step for the Pitt football program, but it's also a step up in terms of recruiting that, the ACC is attracting some different type of talent. And so you're going to see Pitt go after some more speed. You're going to see them maybe adjust the style of, not necessarily the style of football, but maybe the style of athlete they're going after as well.
And I think we've seen that already. I think we're seeing a lot of versatile athletes coming in here, kids that have that combination of power and speed. I don't think there's any question that the ACC is a major player as far as the ever-changing conference scheme landscape in college sports, not only for football but also for basketball. Whereas the Big East was always on the bubble. Was the Big East still going to maintain its automatic bid as far as the BCS was concerned, even though that's not going to be a factor in a few years? The play teams leaving, teams coming in, that couldn't help. And plus, these young men. I mean, where would you rather play some of your games, in front of a sold-out crowd in Tallahassee or in front of a half stadium filled in Piscataway? No offense, Piscataway, but
well, I think another thing, Don, is that when you look at this schedule, that Pitt has more conference opponents lined up, so they have less out-of-conference games they have to go and schedule, and so you're going to see more marquee games on the schedule, and I think that helps in terms of recruiting. When you're going to have home games and you want to bring prospects in for a junior day or for a senior day and have some of the top seniors come to your games, that you have a better home schedule, that you have a better overall schedule, and that's impressive to recruits because they honestly they don't want to go and see a play against a team that's considered a patsy in a blowout game, and usually Pitt doesn't use those games as games to draw recruits to. So they have more opportunities to showcase what the football program is all about, but also getting the kids on campus. Anytime they can get them here, they can have a chance to tour the campus in Oakland, to tour the Southside facilities, and to check out Heinz Field all in one day.
Yeah, and stability too. I mean, stability I think comes into play as far as the conference is concerned. And building rivalries. I mean, I think that's a big thing too. When Penn State goes to the Big Ten, 10, 15 years ago, West Virginia leaves the Big East. Two great rivals of the University of Pittsburgh are gone. Now, when you're seeing these teams every year and you're playing, teams in your division every year and the teams out of your division in the ACC once every 2 years, you're able to build up that rivalry and able to generate that passion, and I think that helps as far as the attendance goes as well. And like Pat said, the home schedule is second to none as far as this 2013 fall season is concerned.
Yeah. And speaking of rivalries, Don, is one of the things you have to look at is that they're reuniting with some old rivals. And Virginia Tech and Boston College, Syracuse will remain a rival. So those are all things that help, is that it's not a complete break, that there are some old faces and some new faces, and that's exciting too. That I think it's going to get some of the Pitt fans to go on some more road trips, and you'll see Pitt maybe a little better represented on the road than it has been in the past, because they want to go see some of these new schools that are going to become annual opponents, and they're going to want to see them for football and basketball season. So they get a chance to check out some new venues on the schedule in terms of conference play, and then. I think the non-conference schedule, anytime you can get a Notre Dame on your schedule, home or away, that's a great thing for Pitt. That's been a great rivalry over the years, and it's produced some legendary games, as our Pat Bostic here knows. He's been part of it, and he's experienced the thrill of beating in Notre Dame at Notre Dame Stadium.
Yeah, and you guys are right on. I think it's beneficial for everyone involved. Fans want to be a part of games like that. They want to come to Heinz Field and see it electric. I can remember playing Notre Dame at Heinz Field in 2009. I have never been, and I've been to a couple different places where it's big, loud, and packed. It was electric. Recruits, players want to play in those games. They want to play against marquee opponents. They want to play against teams that I would consider, using this term, name brand.
Yeah.
Name brand teams, you know who they are. You
made your first start, I believe, against Virginia, too. That was a great venue for college football. Really enjoyed the atmosphere. Maybe not so much the result, but the atmosphere for sure.
Played against Chris Long, which was very intimidating for my first start, but it's a great place to play.
You guys did you get introduced that game?
No, maybe indirectly when he plowed me into the ground. But, it's all going to be good, and that's the important thing. And we can look at the benefits of the ACC and talk about it from a recruit standpoint. We have a great video package we're going to toss to you right now that really takes a look at this ACC move.
To move directly to the bottom line, we're very excited that the future of the University of Pittsburgh will include membership in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Players, coaches, and fans alike are extremely excited about Pitt's upcoming game against Virginia Tech. It's the rebirth of an old Big East rivalry and a glimpse into Pitt's bright future in the ACC. Pitt Athletic Director Steve Peterson has been dreaming of this day for a long time. We had a chance to sit down and talk to him about Pitt's bright future in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Well, it's interesting, when we kind of started all this in 1996, one of the things we felt strongly about was we were behind in so many areas, that certainly facility-wise we were light years behind what other people were doing. In terms of things that we were doing to make our student athletes compete at the highest levels, I felt like we were really behind. And what I said to the senior leadership team was, we have to build a program that is so strong and mirrors this great university, so when expansion occurs, that the University of Pittsburgh will be in a position to be at the forefront of this.
Obviously the landscape had changed throughout the conferences, and we needed to be at the forefront of that and choosing where we wanted to go and not be the one that gets chosen where they end up.
In positioning itself for this move, Pitt has seen its facilities improve drastically. The Peterson Event Center, Heinz Field, the Peterson Sports Complex, and a renovated Fitzgerald Fieldhouse will prove to be a great venue for ACC competition.
And the facilities show the commitment of the university, and I think if you work here and you've been a part of the program as long as I have, you know the commitment of the university towards athletics and towards the growth of the university. But I think for outsiders, seeing the facility, I think that's the easiest thing that they can point to, they can attach themselves to. And when you see an arena being built, you see the baseball stadiums, what they did with Heinz Field and the football complex over there, there's no question that this university needs to play at the highest level, play with the best programs. And we went from what were considered the worst facilities in the conference to what I think probably top to bottom, maybe the best in the conference, and that says a lot.
When you can tell a young person that they're going to play soccer in the ACC, or they're going to play baseball in the ACC, or they're going to play volleyball in the ACC, all of a sudden you have a whole different deal in terms of what you're selling and what you're recruiting. And so every one of our coaches would tell you to a person that recruiting has been dramatically impacted.
The benefits of joining the ACC are far-reaching. This is not just an athletic department move.
But we really haven't begun to see all of the advantages of being associated with 13 other great institutions. When the presidents of the ACC meet, they talk about academic initiatives first and foremost, and then eventually get to the athletic component of this. But they really do believe that the high tide lifts all boats, and the greater that we all do academically and the greater universities we build, the better off everybody's going to be.
Moving forward, Pitt's football schedule will provide a clear road to the national championship, while its basketball schedule will rival anyone in the country.
Heading in that direction, playing in that region, is going to be beneficial to us.
That just means more and more great ACC games for all of our fans to see. Tough competition. None of those are going to be easy, but they're going to be great games, and being a season ticket holder in either one of those sports is really going to be a tremendous value and tremendous excitement.
Great stuff there, and we should let you know, we know there's a lot of activity on Twitter. Our hashtag is PittLivewire. We can't update you here until we get that fax to come through the fax machine, but we do have some great news when we return right here on Pitt Livewire's National Letter of Intent Day special. And welcome back to Pitt Livewire's National Letter of Intent Day special. How about that? We've got some breaking news here on the show. We've got 3 signees that just sent their faxes in, all from the same high school, Kevin. Clairton High School. Titus Howard, a defensive back, 6'1", 180 from Clairton. Coach Tom Nola, we all know what that team has done. I believe it's 4 straight state championships.
Five consecutive WPL Class A titles, 4 straight state championships.
48-0.
They've won 63
in a row.
A state record and nation's leading 63 consecutive victories.
I can't even fathom that.
Yeah, it's just been an incredible run, and these three have really been at the heart of the success the past 2 seasons.
These three, the senior and the other seniors on this team, lost their very first game as a varsity player in 2009 to Laurel, and that was a stunning upset because Clairton was the defending WPL champs, 63 in a row, never lost again. So that's pretty good.
Kids from that kind of program is good. I mean, winning is a habit. It's a habit. We hear Coach Jamie Dixon talk about all the time. He wants guys from winning programs, and no one's won more than Clairton around here. You look at this group again. We'll outline it. Titus Howard, defensive back, 6'1", 180. And you look at Terrence Webb, a defensive back, 5'11", 170. Both guys active in the run game, very good receivers, multiple players. And the guy everyone's been waiting for, we know you've chronicled it. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of hype surrounding, but commitment of Tyler Boyd has stayed true. He has signed his letter of intent to the University of Pittsburgh. It was faxed in moments ago. And a big-name player. I mean, an excellent football player. Versatility doesn't even begin to describe what he can do with the football in his hands. He's played multiple positions. You guys know these guys better than I do. I've watched them on film. That only gives us a kind of a foot in the door. From these three guys, let's start talking about – let's Tyler Boyd start with first. What jumps off the page about him for you, Kevin?
Well, the thing about Tyler Boyd is obviously this was the marquee skill recruit for the Panthers this year, a guy who when you look at what he did in high school, he played quarterback, he played running back, he played wide receiver, he played corner and safety, returned kicks and punts. Just a fantastic, dynamic, all-around player who has that wide-open ability in the open field to make people miss, to run, and it looks so effortless. He doesn't look like he's going that fast, but he glides by everyone. This is a guy who has big play ability, and not only does he have big play ability, but he seemed to do it in the clutch for the Bears more often than not, that he came through when they needed him, that he had the star power that Tom Nola has called him the best Bear that he's coached in 11 years. And he's done it on the huge stage. He did it in the state championship game as a junior and the WPL championship game this season. He's played at Heinz Field 4 times now, so these guys are familiar with the home field. So that's a big thing for them. They bring that winning swagger, and Tyler Boyd probably brings it more so than anyone else. And just in the terms of a guy who, what most impressed me about him outside of what he did at Clairton was he wanted to get that recognition as a national recruit, and he went out and went to every camp he could possibly compete at and tried to improve his star ranking, his national reputation. He earned himself an invitation as the first WPL Class A player to ever get selected for the U.S. Army All-American Bowl in San Antonio. He's a guy who went to nationalrivals.com camps in Atlanta and in Texas and went there and competed against the best. This is a guy who wants to be the best. Pitt had to fight for him, and I think in the end, his heart won out that he gets to play with what he called his brothers and Titus Howard and Terrence Webb and even Kevin Weatherspoon, who's there now, as well as Trenton Coles, all former and current Clairton teammates, but also his stepbrother, Tyreek Jarrett, a guy who he grew up in the same house with at times. And so, that his heart won out with the University of Pittsburgh, and I think he realized when it came down to it that he wanted to be the hometown hero more so than the guy that went away.
I remember talking to somebody in the know, so to speak, and they said if Pitt can get one of the big three, Dorian Johnson, Tyler Boyd were among them, that would be very good. If they can get 2 of the 3, that's tremendous. And why not? Tyler Boyd, nobody has scored more touchdowns in WPIL history than Tyler Boyd. I think Kevin used a good word to describe him. He glides. He reminds me a lot from that standpoint of a Steve Breston. I thought Steve Breston, he would get open field and he would glide. You would think he really wasn't running hard, yet there was nobody near him. And once he hit open field, he usually took it to pay dirt. Obviously, Tyler Boyd's been pretty good at that as well. Started out as a receiver after an injury, took over at running back, and has that versatility that Kevin mentioned as well, and will be a receiver at this level. And he's been the key player. Not only, I know Tom Nola said he's the best player he's ever coached. I've talked to a lot of coaches in Class A, opponents obviously, that have said he's by far the best player that they've ever seen. And some people will say, well, okay, Class A, but he's going up against Class A competition. Well, you know what? He's surrounded by Class A players too. I think that's a fair argument for those who who complain about kids from smaller schools. Well, their teammates are from smaller schools too. So
well, here's another thing to bring up about that Class A argument. Here's a guy in Tyler Boyd, finished his career as the 5th all-time leading rusher in WPL history with 5,755 yards. He did that despite not really playing running back until his junior year. As a sophomore, he split carries. As a freshman, he might have seen a little bit of time. But the majority of those 5,000 yards were over the past 2 seasons. He did that despite being in a number of regular season blowouts, not playing past the third quarter. He did that despite having 2 Division I talents at receiver this past season, the past 2 seasons, in Titus Howard and Terrence Webb this year, and Webb and Trenton Coles the previous season. He did this despite playing quarterback at times and actually throwing the ball and not carrying it. So when you look at this as a guy who had 2,584 rushing yards this year, had 218 receiving yards and scored 51 touchdowns this season alone. Yes, he had 16 games to do it, but really when you look at the schedule, he probably played the equivalent of 12 full games. So the numbers that he's putting up are eye-popping. And the thing about it is he didn't do it alone, but he certainly carried the Bears when they needed to be carried. And I think that says a lot about a guy who understands what it's like to deal with that type of pressure. And I think one of the things that's probably the most promising about Tyler Boyd is that he's only 6'2", 170, that he still has hit the weight room. He plays football, basketball, and even played baseball. Last year I saw him. This is something that will impress Panther fans. Last year, Clairton, for as much success as they have on the football field, they had a 48-game losing streak in baseball. Tyler Boyd showed up to help end the streak, played shortstop and batted second. I got to the game 5 minutes after it started, had already hit an inside-the-park home run. Started at shortstop, they broke the streak. Tyler Boyd shows up, and it was that type of a difference. He's that type of an athlete. I think he's got a lot of room for potential, and I think this was a huge coup for the Panthers.
Absolutely, and he figures to be a guy who could have an immediate impact because it's a receiver position that has a lot of unproven type of talent in that you have Devin Street returning. Mike Shanahan obviously is gone. He was a marquee guy over the past 3 years, was really a standout, really their main target. So a guy who has that type of talent who could figure into that mix. Let's talk a little bit about the guys that are slated to be on the defensive side of the ball. Titus Howard, Terrence Webb. Those guys, watching Webb play at least, very active in the run. A lot of run teams around here in the city of Pittsburgh and around Pittsburgh area and stopping the run. What type of cover skills do they have? Have we seen the best of them on offense or defense? Where do you think they've shown their talents most, and where do you think they'll end up, D-back or receiver?
I think Titus Howard was a tremendous shutdown corner, and I think he'll end up on the defensive side of the ball. He suffered a pretty nasty injury in the state playoffs, dislocated elbow that obviously is healed. He's back helping the Clairton Bears basketball team, so that obviously isn't a concern. But I think as far as Titus Howard is concerned, and we're going to see some highlights here of Howard in action. He was, I thought, one of the premier shutdown cornerbacks in the WPIL this past season, showing that he can also help on run support on some of these highlights too. But I think the fact that they have those wide receiver skills, it helps them ball hawk a little bit, both Titus and Terrence, as far as their cornerback abilities are concerned.
Well, the thing I like about Titus Howard, Pat, you mentioned 6'1". He's closer to 6'4". Great size and length for a cornerback. He's got the speed as well. He's kind of built like a stick figure, but he likes to stick people. He likes to hit. He's the biggest hitter in that secondary, more so than Boyd or Webb or anybody else. He was, I thought, defensively the catalyst for the Bears in their secondary. I thought he's a guy who has great ball skills. He can go up and play big guys in coverage. He can go up and jump up after the ball. Great leaping ability, good speed, good closing ability. I saw him get beat in coverage and recover and make a great play in the playoffs against Neshannock. And I've seen him make some great touchdown-saving tackles. I think he's one of the guys who's a real steal in terms of being a two-star recruit that the Panthers identified as a BCS prospect earlier than most of the other schools that were even looking at Titus Howard. And his versatility, you see him playing football and basketball. He's the kind of guy who's, gets up and dunks in the basketball games. I think he can be a real steal as a cornerback, especially when you see that the move toward bigger and tall, fast receivers. I think he's the kind of guy who can really help defend those type of players.
Absolutely, and he's a guy, too. You saw him on a couple corner blitzes there.
Mm-hmm.
Got in the backfield, had some tackles for losses, some sacks. How about Webb? What does Webb bring to the table?
I think Webb might have a better chance on the offensive side of the ball. I think he was a big weapon for them offensively when they weren't handing the ball off to Tyler Boyd. but also obviously a pretty good defensive player here. You see him with the pick. Originally was going to had committed to Kent State, but I think that when Pitt came in the picture, because of as Kevin alluded to, the Clairton Pitt connection helped to make him reconsider and come to the University of Pittsburgh. I think his future, and again, who am I, but I think his future may be more on offense than defense. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
I agree with you, Don. He's a guy that he had a great season as a wide receiver, averaged over 20 yards per catch. He was actually Clairton's best offensive weapon in the state playoffs because everybody focused so heavily on stopping Tyler Boyd that Terrence Webb became the go-to guy just to loosen up the defenses. But what I saw from him was a guy who had great footwork in tight spaces. He has some breakaway speed. Although he may not be clocked as a 4.40 guy, he's the kind of guy who has that good football speed and pulls away from people. We saw that in the state championship game when he was a junior. He had 2 receptions of, I think, close to 80 yards each in the state championship game, both in the first half. He's a guy who also led the team in interceptions, very easily could play corner or maybe even a safety position. I think he's open to and receptive to the idea of playing offense or defense. And like Zach Challingsworth, another guy who turned 17 during his senior football season. I believe he's a September birthday, so he's the kind of guy who could really benefit from a redshirt year. I thought Terrence Webb was, a better than a MAC level talent. He had committed to Kent State, and he actually didn't decommit from Kent State, contrary to popular belief. He actually, Kent State's coaching staff left for Purdue and didn't offer him a scholarship at Purdue after Pitt had offered him one following the WPL championship game. But what I like about Terrence Webb is in the receiver, he's a guy who, if you're looking for a first down, you're looking for a guy who can get open, put some space between himself and the cornerback. I saw him in the state championship game use his body to shield himself from the corner and then do a little spin move and then some nifty footwork to get away from the defender. And I just see him being a natural receiver, but a guy who can also play cornerback. And I think you can never have too many guys like that. I think you have guys who can play either side of the ball and understand both sides of the ball. So wherever, if they're playing receiver, they understand what the corner is trying to do and vice versa if they're on defense.
It's good stuff, absolutely. Good football players. You can't get enough of them.
Yeah.
Well, we've got 3 signees coming from Clairton. That puts our total to 22 signees have sent their letters of intent and binding letters of intent cementing their future as Pitt Panthers, along with 4 that are already on campus. Our total then at 26 total signees in the 2013 football recruiting class. Don Rebel from the MSA Sports Network, Kevin Gorman from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Thank you so much for all of your expert analysis. We appreciate it. We'll be back with a lot more after the break. Welcome back to Pitt Livewire's National Letter of Intent Day special. And we talked earlier about the excitement that accompanies the move to the ACC, what it's done for recruiting, how it's impacted some of these guys. A big signing class coming in. We just brought in the signees from Clairton, Tyler Boyd, Titus Howard, and Terrish Webb. But to further talk about the impact of this move, we've brought in and welcome Associate Athletic Director for External Relations, Mr. Chris Ferris. And Chris, what have you noticed? What's been the biggest thing about the move to the ACC that you've heard amongst fans in your talks with them and your talks with the students?
You know, Pat, it's really been amazing, and I have to say it really starts with the enthusiasm for our program. I think first and foremost, people are really excited about this Pitt football team in the future, and then certainly when you look at the programs that are going to be coming into Heinz Field. I mean, wow, the ACC is really from top to bottom some big-time, very, very good football programs, and we're excited. 2013. We've got 7 great home games, and it's going to be great. It starts, obviously with Notre Dame, which is a traditional non-conference opponent that we've played, but then certainly Florida State. We've got the University of Miami, Virginia, North Carolina. So we're very, very excited about 2013.
Absolutely. And you look at those home opponents, away opponents. We'll take a look at a graphic here talking about basically we got Notre Dame on tap, obviously at home. Villanova, New Mexico, the non-conference slate with Notre Dame additionally. Miami, North Carolina, Virginia, the reigning ACC champions, Florida State, who beat Northern Illinois in a bowl game. Then the away trips, great away trips. Navy, always a fun place to play. Then in conference, Georgia Tech, another option team, 2 option teams, Virginia Tech. They're going to be looking to exact some revenge, a great history in that rivalry, and then going down to Duke, a very cool place to go down to the Raleigh-Durham area, and back up to Syracuse for 2 straight years. A lot of excitement accompanying this schedule. And we talked earlier about these are the kind of games recruits want to play in, fans want to play in. And the fans really starts with the students. And we talk about the Peterson Event Center, the success that's been there, 2 million fans over the past 11 years that the building's been open. And it starts with the Oakland Zoo, the students. And we had a Twitter question from J.D. Schroeder, the leader of the Oakland Zoo, basically talking about this move to the ACC. And amongst the students and the Panther Pit, how's the enthusiasm, momentum of that group moving into the ACC?
Wow. I mean, Pat, when you think of the student fan support at the University of Pittsburgh, we saw it the other day. We've seen it all along in the Peterson Event Center with the Oakland Zoo. Unbelievable. Really the best student section in the country. I don't think there's any question there. The energy level, and certainly now the Panther Pit and the energy we're seeing at Heinz Field. We've sold out of student season tickets for the past several years, really the past 4 years. It's been unbelievable, and that's going to happen again. Our students have been great, and then that energy really spills over to all of our fans. And we've had some great early momentum with ticket sales so far. Having another great day today, and I think with the excitement of today, and then certainly looking ahead as we get closer into spring football, that excitement will continue.
Absolutely. You look at the excitement with ticket sales. You can visit PittsburghPanthers.com. Football tickets, the ticket section to look into and possibly purchase football tickets for this coming season. A lot of excitement throughout the student section, throughout the alumni base, throughout the fan base. Certainly warranted enthusiasm. We talk moving forward about the ACC, not just in football, but in basketball, the prospects of hosting a Duke or a North Carolina. I think the excitement is far-reaching in the university, in your external relations with the university and different parts of that group. How excited are the people on campus also about this move? Because I think that's a part of it as well.
There's no question, Pat. Moving into the ACC, we're now partnered with a lot of peer institutions, schools that are doing great not only athletically, and really first and foremost are great institutions, great academic institutions just like the University of Pittsburgh. And I want to get back. JD asked about what my personal favorite part of this is, or what I'm most excited about going into the ACC. And I really think it's the enthusiasm around the competition coming into Heinz Field. Not only as we look into the future do we have these great ACC programs coming to Heinz Field, but then we also have Penn State coming on the slate. That's really exciting too, a traditional rivalry, and I think that's great for all Pitt fans, Pitt alums, but as well as Penn State alumni.
Yeah, it's great. The future is extremely bright, and today is a great starting point, a great signing class. We've got 26 in so far. If you count the 4 that are already enrolled, we'll have much more. We thank Chris Ferris for coming on board. Some great excitement accompanying this move to the ACC. We'll be back with a lot more right here on Pitt Livewire's National Letter of Intent Day Special. And welcome back to Pitt Live Wire's National Letter of Intent Day special. Pat Bostic sitting in here. We're entering the 11 o'clock hour. We started at 7:30 a.m. We've had a lot of film. A lot of signees have faxed in their letters of intent. And we're human. We did miss one. We had him on the screen. We had a graphic. We talked about him. But we want to take a look at the film from Matt Galambos. And Galambos, a linebacker out of Collingdale, PA, the Haverford School. Good football player. Another linebacker to add to that group. You look at what he brings to the table. Physical football player coming off the edge there. Very, very athletic. Watch how he finds the football here. Downhill player. Really like that about him. This linebacking core for Pitt is going to need some youth. You've got Todd Thomas, Shane Gordon, older guys entering their third and fourth year. To have some youth to go along with the guys inside like Mike Caprera, Tayshaun Rippey, Bam Bradley. Galambos can add to that. A good offensive player as well. Adds the versatility, but really just an athletic football player. Gets off blocks, has a Scott McKillop type of feel to him. Not some bone-crushing hits, but certainly is going to make the play, can cover, and will be a factor in fall camp to see where it shakes out. Could benefit from a redshirt year, but wanted to take a look at that film as we go back now to really highlight this entire recruiting class. We've got 26 confirmed letters of intent sent through the fax machine that we've talked about here on Live Wire's National Letter of Intent Day special. Galambos was one of them, 6'2", 215. And we go through the list right now. Carson Baker, an offensive lineman from Fairborn, Ohio, has signed his letter of intent. Chris Blewett, place kicker out of Alexandria, Virginia. And I'm going in alphabetical order, but we'll go in order as they came in. Aaron Reese was the first one in. Zach Chollingsworth, a receiver from South Fayette. Luke McLean, defensive end from Michigan. Chris Blewett, kicker, we just referenced him. James Conner, running back from Erie McDowell. Dorian Johnson, the big recruit out of Bell Vernon, big kid, offensive lineman. Devin Edwards, big tight end out of Columbus. Zach Poker, a linebacker out of Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. Ryan Winslow, a punter from the eastern part of the state. Tony Harper, a tight end. Jester Wea, a wide receiver from Madison, Wisconsin. Reggie Green, an athlete from New Jersey. Alex Officer, an offensive tackle from New York. Carson Baker, an offensive lineman from Ohio. Jared Jones Hamburger Smith, an offensive lineman. Justin Moody, a defensive end. Jamar Parrish, a fullback type H-back out of Gateway High School, and Matt Galambos, who we just watched film of. Finally, we get to the last page here. Rashid Ibrahim, Tyler Boyd out of Clairton, a big-name recruit. We've been waiting for that to come through. It came through. His teammates are along with him. Titus Howard, defensive back, and Terrence Webb, defensive backs out of Clairton. Scott Orndoff, already enrolled in classes, big tight end out of Seton LaSalle High School. Tyreek Jarrett, a big defensive tackle, also an early enrollee out of Alderdice High School, also went to Milford. Shakir Soto, big defensive end out of Wilkes-Barre, figures to be a force, also enrolled early, is Trayvon Chapman, quarterback out of Kent, Ohio. We're going to focus now, looking at this group, who are 5 guys that might have an impact this year? Who are 5 guys that could figure into the mix as we move on to 2013 season? Look at Dorian Johnson. He's my first one. Big offensive tackle, I think, is an excellent football player and just plays with the motor. Number 2, Tyler Boyd, an extremely good football player. Here's footage of Dorian Johnson pulling. Look at the athleticism, the size, the impact. He's physical. He's a man amongst boys at Bell Vernon, playing in the Mon Valley area. Very good football player. Number 2, Tyler Boyd, I think is an excellent football player out of Clairton. Certainly brings positional flexibility to the table, having played receiver and running back as well as defensive back. Was a mainstay in the 4 straight state championships at Clairton, along with his teammates Titus Howard and Terrence Webb. You look at that guy right there is a guy who probably has a chance to accompany or complement Devin Street as you move down the list to Trey Chapman, a quarterback I think could have a chance to figure into the competition this spring. You look at number 4, Scott Orndoff is tight end, a position of need for the Panthers as they don't have a lot of depth there, and they saw that last year with Hubie Graham battling some injuries, but Scott Orndoff could figure into the mix this spring. And lastly, Shakir Soto, defensive end, a position that needs to be fortified. Haven't got enough productivity from that spot. They need guys that can get after the passer. Soto can do that. Watching his film was extremely, extremely impressive. Coming back, we're going to have someone on the set that knows a lot more about recruiting than I do. We'll bring Dan Cabala, Pitt's recruiting coordinator, on set right here on Pitt Live Wire's National Letter of Intent Day coverage. Welcome back to Pitt Livewire's National Letter of Intent Day Special. I'm Pat Bostic, joined by Pitt Football's Director of Player Personnel, Dan Kabala. Dan's a guy that was here when I came here in 2007 as a recruit, took care of me, tried to help me out when I was a young guy who didn't have any direction, didn't know what he was doing. And he went to Arkansas for a couple years, and now you're back. What's it been like to be back with Coach Chris back here in Pittsburgh?
It's been awesome, Pat. Pitt's always been the place where I've wanted to be. It's a great place, and working for the staff and Coach Chris, it's been amazing.
You know, you've always been, having been here, those Pitt ties, and being able to do what you do in player personnel. What exactly is your role? I know you're involved in the recruiting process. What exactly do you do on a daily basis throughout the course of not only the season but the year?
Well, I look at my job as this. Whatever I can do to help the coaches make their job easier, that's how I approach my day. So whether it's collecting film, collecting transcripts, getting them to the coaches, all that kind of stuff, that's day to day. And really, the first thing I do every day is talk to the recruits on Facebook, on Twitter, as much as I can. I think being in touch with them, that's a big part of my job.
Absolutely, in the relationship building process. And recruiting is crazier than it's ever been. And we know that, and we've seen how the process has transpired through this. Really the first full year for your staff here at Pitt to recruit. How's the process been? What have the relationships been like? How has Coach Chris and the staff been received?
They've been received unbelievable. I mean, the response we're getting as we go into schools, people are excited to see Pitt in schools. I mean, out in Philadelphia, the response we've had in Philadelphia because of Coach Huber has been the best probably in a long time. I think everyone's excited about Pitt. It's a great place, and that's what we're trying to get the message out there. We're trying to find guys who are smart, tough, and dependable, and those guys are going to take us to where we want to go. Yeah, and as you look down this list, a lot of guys that kind of fit that mold, tight ends, offensive linemen, tough kids that are going to play in the trenches because we know that's where it starts. But the big-name guys, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the guru about some of the big-name guys that we've brought in. Obviously, Dorian Johnson, and you've got to know him over time now as he committed and faxed in his letter of intent today. What in your relationship with him, what jumps off the page about Dorian? The best part about Dorian is all he cares about is football. He's a football guy, and that's why we like him a lot. You know, I've heard people say he's got some of the best offensive line tape in the country, but he's a football guy, and that's what he cares about. That's the best part about Dorian. You know, and a lot has been chronicled about with Tyler Boyd and his whole process, and obviously a huge day for the Panthers as he did fax his letter of intent and stayed true to his commitment to the University of Pittsburgh. Through all of that, in building that relationship, what's it been like to get to know Tyler? Tyler's a special kid. I mean, people gravitate to Tyler. He's got that kind of personality, and I think he's going to bring our team and this freshman class along with him. So it's been a great experience, not only with Tyler, but his mom. His mom's a great lady. You got to know a lot of these people. Dan Kabala, Director of Player Personnel, really spearheading, helping out with the recruiting process, tied this class together. We've got 26 letters of intent in, and we followed every one of them here on Pitt Livewire's National Letter of Intent Day coverage. We're waiting for a couple more. We might be coming forward in the next couple hours. We're going to close our coverage of signing day right here on PittsburghPanthers.com. Thank you for tuning in.